been a lot of drama around EG, though. Probably got to them somewhat, the sickness, the lack of practice. But I think for
you're
all
saying
the
that they were down with the sickness then, Monty?
They were down with the sickness.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. There you go. It's all good.
Ooh, oh man, Thorin, it is cold in here. It must be the
really?
esports winter setting in. I know you saw the news about CLG and TSM. It's really frigid, but you know, the thing that's even colder than esports winter is your glycerin chamber with freeze pipe. Of course, after you put it in the freezer for an entire hour before you smoke, it'll cool the smoke by over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. This year is from the Bong XL from Freeze Pipe. Don't have to put the whole thing in. Just take the glycerin chamber out. It is delightful. Of course, with 420 coming up, you can take the edge off the esports winter by getting yourself a Freeze Pipe. Go over to www.thefreezepipe.com and your entire order, you'll get 10% off if you use the code LASTFreeNation. That's actually the code LFN, excuse me. It's on your screen right now. I'm dumb. LFN stands for Last Free Nation. At checkout, 10% off your order, 420 in 2 weeks. Enjoy. I'm sure many of those employees at TSM and CLG could use a chill out right now, given what's happening, unfortunately. So thefreezepipe.com, code LFN. Thank you.
Yeah, just two things I would say to that. One is that unlike CLG and TSM, we want all the smoke. That's the point. We want it all. They can't handle it. They're not like Freeze Pipe with the glycerin chamber. And then secondly, also, when Monty talked about that specific one there, the Bong XL, don't get confused with like the people who were fucking up that LEC team. XL, who are a bunch of Brit Bong idiots. Like that's a totally different thing. And they also can't handle all the smoke, as you'll soon find out. That's a little breadcrumb for something that might be coming to my channel soon. So there you go.
Oh boy.
There you go.
The teasers. So I thought that was a good transition.
Yeah,
very unfortunate that we are facing what's going on with TSM and CLG right now, which is obviously going to be probably a large part of this show is the meta discussion about what's happening. CLG, the news dropped yesterday from journalist of convenience, Travis Gafford. I've noticed that when it's beneficial for him, he's a journalist and actually brings information. But when it's not beneficial for him, he claims he's a content creator and not a journalist. It's crazy how that works.
Also, I will just throw this out there. Like, one thing Travis never seemed to understand, even though he actually nailed it on the Danny kit situation. I agree with Richard's position. Travis is correct. He's actually right that since he knows he has an obvious conflict of interest that he dated one of the main people accused of doing the things to Danny, it's actually totally correct to essentially recuse yourself and say, I will not speak on this topic at all. Now, by the way, that's better, by the way, guys, than if he'd come out with some mealy mouth thing like, oh, sorry about all the people, like Captain Flag, sorry about all the people who got wrecked. But you don't say the name. That's way more conspicuous. Also, if he'd have come out and said something, it's not a big deal. It's actually way better that he said nothing. The problem is this. It does also infer the following, which people don't want to have to think about, which is you're hardly totally neutral when it comes to CLG, TSM, right, Travis? You were literally like blacklisted once from your livelihood by TSM. You literally used to be friends with all the people who ran CLG, literally personal friends, not wish to a double if Kelby, Hotshot back in the day. Like you had mad connections. So all I'll say is when you do leak stuff like that, look, it's all well and good if you're just leaking, like, I heard this, but like, there's obvious disclaimers you got to put out there, mate. Like there's you're not just some totally neutral observer. What's going on with the CLG team? By the way, to start in on that topic, one thing I want to say at the outset is this. People are really misunderstanding a key difference between CLG and TSM, and they're conflating the two issues, which is this. TSM is still Reginald to this day, is run by Reginald. In fact, Riot even themselves essentially said in their investigation around it that one of the conditions of it was Reginald couldn't interfere with the League of Legends team anymore. They've expressly told you it's still Reggie. If you don't know, Hotshot hasn't been involved with CLG for many years. I don't know if I don't think he even owns any of it anymore, runs it, right? So as far as I know, that CLG is in some ways essentially CLG, the team you all remember, that died years ago actually. Like now this is just the corpse died now,
Yeah, but so guys, in case you didn't realize, it's possible that some people still own minority stakes of CLG, but I doubt it, because I think just based on the ownership, so they were bought out by Madison Square Garden, which is Jim Dolan's company, and Jim Dolan.
This was quite a few years ago, right? This is what, 4 or 5 years or something.
It was 2016, 2017 that deal occurred. Yeah, it was a long time ago. And the Madison Square Garden company obviously owns Madison Square Garden, the famous arena in New York City. They also own the New York Rangers NHL hockey team, and they own the Knicks, which is the NBA team. They probably own some other sports teams as well, more minor sports teams. But the point is like they're very famous in New York. Jim Dolan is a very famous personality of dubious character.
He's essentially considered like if you know the NFL, he's like the Jerry Jones of basketball, most famously with the Knicks. Like people think he interferes too much as an owner.
Yeah, and he does. And he does. So in any case, like when people were talking about, oh, well, the CLG brand is, no longer an endemic org, or this is such a tragedy. It really just isn't.
No,
like,
exactly.
Really, it hasn't been the CLG that I coached for or that Hotshot owned in a long ass time, guys, like 6-7 years at this point. And honestly, because the brand was handled so badly by Madison Square Garden, I mean, they didn't, I always thought it was weird that when they bought the company, they didn't actually make it a condition of the buyout to have Hotshot GG as like a mascot or whatever.
A bit like when, if people remember when Astralis bought Origin, initially they wanted Expect Evolve for that reason, to sort of keep the branding consistent.
Yeah. So like I was really surprised that they didn't actually have a clause in there that would require Hotshot to be active, and for them to, pay him to do that, obviously, but he would get the enormous buyout as a result of selling to Madison Square Garden. That deal was brokered by a consulting. I didn't do it, but that deal was brokered by a consulting firm that I was working for at the time called Catalyst. So yeah, I was surprised. And they really just haven't done much with the brand, and they haven't really been active. I mean, one of their keys has always been having the CLG Red, like female Counter-Strike team that has been like a pillar of the organization. If we're to believe what Travis is saying, they may be cutting that. Smash has been a game that they've been pretty heavily invested in, but it's notoriously difficult to get returns as a company on fighting game players, and especially Smash players. And the reason why is because when you have all of these open brackets for fighting games, you can't guarantee that your players are going to get significant airtime because they might just get knocked down in pools or something like that. And even if that's not true, sponsors will leverage that against you to pay lower.
For sure.
So even if you have the greatest player in the world who's like 99.9% likely to make top 16 or top 8, the sponsor will be like, but what if they don't make top 8? And then they'll lower those payments. And especially in Smash too, because as you've seen, Nintendo is famously mercurial when it comes to esports, and they basically just canceled the Smash circuit this year all of a sudden. So yeah, I mean, it is tough, I think, to be in some of these games that they've been in. And honestly, guys, because CLG was franchised immediately with the league, they would have paid at the time, for those of you who remember in 2017, if you were an existing LCS team, you paid $10 million for the LCS license. If you were not, and they brought you in, you paid 12. And then the $2 million difference was paid out to the other LCS teams who were not franchised. So they got a relative bargain. Now, we don't know the sales price because, I mean, we've discussed this before on the show. When FlyQuest sold, there was no sales price associated with that. You'll notice, well, that's weird because in EU, we saw, it's like $35 million or whatever for 80% of the Misfits slot, and Misfits are retaining 20%. So all these numbers were made public. And the LEC slots were sold cheaper. I think they were sold for like 8 million or something like that. Because the viewership, the viewership at the time wasn't as high in 2017. So they were discounted compared to LCS slots. Obviously, the reverse of that is now true. So when it comes to these numbers, like first off, FlyQuest was bought by a private family, so they don't have to disclose anything. But I suspect, I mean, I know the number, but I'm not going to say it. But I suspect that if the LCS was proud of the fact that these slots had increased significantly in value to the same degree as LEC, it would be in the LCS's best interests to disclose that, oh, this slot also sold for more than an LEC slot or the same as an LEC slot. The reality is that LCS has decreased in value relative to the LEC, but it's still worth more than the $10 million they paid for it. So when you think about CLG trying to sell, Madison Square Garden and many other endemic sports owners, like traditional sports owners, who got into esports expected larger growth, larger returns, at least a path to sustainability at the moment, which hasn't happened. And some of them are starting to consider leaving. And if you're Madison Square Garden, you know, maybe you could sell CLG hypothetically for like 20 to 25 million potentially, and you probably recoup your initial fee, and you probably recoup a lot of the money, if not all of the money that you spent operating this team, because it's not like CLG has been splashing out for
Oh, they've
those,
been a budget
you know,
team.
$7 million a year. Like they've been pretty smart about getting value. So maybe they don't recoup all their money, but they probably recoup most of it. And they exit and they don't have to run this thing anymore. So to me, it seems like it is not that CLG is not that concerning. It is a fully owned traditional sports entity that has decided that they no longer want to be involved in esports. And at the same time, we see one of these traditional sports entities exit. The owners of the Florida Panthers hockey team were the ones who just bought FlyQuest, and they're coming in and making an investment in the same space. So like one's coming in, one's leaving. I think now traditional sports owners have a more sober vision of what esports is, and like obviously it's much better known in the franchise era because we're now 5 years, almost 6 years into it, what the expected returns are. And I think certain traditional sports team owners are going to see this as the original ones should have, which is like, okay, maybe it's a lost leader for now, but we're building up our brand and our expertise in the space because esports in 20 years is still going to be huge. Like it's going to be bigger than it is right now. And I think the people who are coming in understand that and don't mind potentially losing a little bit of money now to generate brand equity later. And also the other advantage that the traditional sports owners have is that they usually have a lot more money, because we're talking about, you know, most people who own traditional sports teams in the United States are like billionaires, right? And so in a world where a lot of these other teams, the endemic esports teams, are having to take venture capital, and as we know, venture capital is very difficult to get, as Thorin and I are currently experiencing ourselves with LFN. They are having to run leaner, which means that the sports owners can kind of spend their way through a recession and actually increase their results, increase their fan bases, have better teams during this like esports winter that we're talking about. And it can make sense for them if they're planning on like a 10 to 20 year timeline, right? They can be very strategic during this era. It's the same thing that we might see ESL do now that they have all the money from the Saudi Arabian government, which is that as everyone else is struggling, they can lose money now to grow a fan base and grow an audience, and get an advantage in the future when the market perks up again. So that's kind of what we're dealing with in the very broad and basic strokes, with what's going on in the esports scene right now. So you see TSM and CLG are very different because TSM is still that endemic team that's funded off of venture capital, and CLG is very much not. They were owned by a traditional sports organization, and that organization wants to exit now, whereas TSM is trying to stay relevant in esports, if we're to believe Reginald trying to buy a CSGO team later this year in preparation for Counter-Strike 2. And they have other businesses such as their technology and website businesses with the Blitz app and their website network, et cetera, et cetera. And they may spend, you know, bare minimum, as it seems, to operate the LCS team right now while searching for a potential buyer.
Like the key thing for me as a difference is, as you say, essentially the people who own CLG are not people who are here because they love League of Legends and it's really important that the brand CLG be in League of Legends and succeed. They're people who were just business people who had an interest. Quite frankly, if you look who they are, it looks to me like, I think it's not even a coincidence they bought CLG, guys. CLG famously won their first LCS title in Madison Square Garden in what was quite a famous sort of spectacle at the time for LCS. It was one of the big roadshow events they had, as opposed to just being in the studio. I've no doubt the Madison Square Garden people saw that. And if you were someone like James Dolan, you would think, I want all the properties that would be around here. So let me get a League of Legends team. So one day when that becomes a sport like the NFL, NHL, NBA, I've got my team already. I could get why that would make sense. The thing is now, Just like a lot of other people economically in hard times, you cut the things you care about the least. So that's why, for example, sponsorship budgets get cut. In this case, next rounds of venture capital don't go to certain teams. Hence why you might have seen in CSGO, people like Heroic openly saying they need money. That's like putting out the feelers, guys, like anyone, we just need the money to continue. So I don't worry that much about the CLG one. The TSM one's the more disturbing one, because as you say, TSM is League of Legends and vice versa in North America. And the key thing for me is this: the people who bought CLG didn't ever go big. As you say, Monty, they had the LCS team because that was the legacy team. Even then, they ran it as a budget roster. And shout out to some of the GMs over those years. They had a couple of lineups that were like third or fourth best in the region that had no business being with the lineups they had, the players they had. Sometimes they went all NA. Sometimes they took in like fallen stars that were down on their luck. They did a very good job over the years if you knew their budget to actually stay relevant. So that's why it tricked people into thinking it was old CLG, even though it wasn't. But as you say, they were barely in CSGO. They mainly themselves, once CSGO got expensive, just flexed into the way the main ones that have the female angle. If you don't know, they had their female team way before anyone else did, because they had people like Miss Harvey, OG people behind the project. They had Potter and all those people. And then also, as you say, the only other games they really in were fighting games. And I'll give everyone the secret sauce on why these big orgs have fighting games. I learned this from my boss at SK many years ago. Here's what you do, Monty. If you have the budget to and it makes sense, you buy in the best players from the biggest games to be number one in esports. But if you can't do that, it actually, believe it or not, often makes more sense that instead of spending 80% of the budget to get the best team, but have the 9th best team in a big game, Monty, it actually makes more sense sometimes for marketing purposes to just get the best player in a small game. So for example, my boss at SK used to always have up his sleeve as an ace that even if the CSGO team or the League of Legends team didn't do well, or the Counter-Strike 1.6 team, he could always flex into, I have the 2 best FIFA players in the world, though. They are, WCG gold medalists and world champions. And he would always have that so that he could always go to his sponsor and say, SK Gaming houses world champions. And it was a way to flex that angle. That's why people like CLG, and when they were here, Echo Fox, if you notice, the main area their best competitors were in the fighting games where it's one guy or 2 guys. You pay them way less than you pay esports people, nowhere near the LCS salaries. Even the minimum LCS salary would probably be the best salary for a Smash player. That's how ridiculous that scene is. But the point is, if that's your whole sort of like portfolio, like I've got an average as fuck LCS team, I've got a female CSGO team, so it's not even one that's like competing with all the bigger brands, and then I've got a bunch of Smash players, that means you were always running that on a budget. The problem I have is this: people are going to think because the results suck for TSM did the same thing. They didn't. The reason why this is very alarming for TSM is, one, they have always bragged, quite primarily it was fucking Lena doing it, but fair enough, they all did it as an org. They've always bragged that they're profitable. They even said after the FTX deal initially got a bit dodgy that there was no problem and everything was going to be fine and they were going to remain profitable and sustainable, all those like nightmare fucking terms that people throw out in esports when they don't even mean what they say at the time. Like, how do you remain sustainable without all the money you were promised, you moron? There's nothing to sustain. It's even a concept in the game, you dickhead. That would be like, oh, I've got a sustain item. Oh, why is it not giving you health back, Reginald? Oh, don't know, just need it though, don't I? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a term. That means something. So basically, if you look at Reginald's angle though, that is a fucking empire falling. That's the end of the Roman Empire, Monty. That's just falling in gradually. Because think about this. People are going to think, if you look at the LCS placings, TSM's been on the downturn for years now. Yeah, but how? Remember, they were supposed to, after the double-lift lineup that won, get another super team lineup with like double-lift and fucking Jensen and Hooney was, obviously Hooney did join it, but you know what I mean? It was Sword Art. It was going to be like a super team. If you don't know, then consider this. Not only was double-lift willing to come back, but then another angle that people don't miss, but I can now reveal because now we know what happened. You know, when we had that episode of the Four Horsemen about Peter Zhang and about all the bullshit he was doing where it seems like he was embezzling money, the darker element that I speculated at was, think of this, Monty, it's deeper than that. He wasn't just taking the money. Essentially, that decided which player ended up joining the team, because if the person talking to him doesn't want to give him the cut, they don't get it. Well, do you know what's crazy about that? That a lot of this penny hasn't dropped for so many fans, Monty. Go back now, guys, and look at the names that were rumored he was talking to. This motherfucker chose that bomb-ass player over Bo. Both from Vitality was in that mix, but I'm going to guess maybe his guy or his agent didn't want to give Peter Zhang the money, so they didn't pick one of like the craziest import, like fucking pieces of found treasure you'll ever find. They didn't pick him. They picked whoever Peter Zhang told him to do this guy because he was getting his fucking cut, or they kept speaking then, or whatever the fuck it was. Whatever angle they took. The point is, TSM hasn't gone super budget. They've, as far as I can tell, and if you know the Sword Art deal, they not only got Sword Art guys, they did such a bad deal with him, Team Liquid style for some reason, because I don't know why they do those. Like the Hans Summer one where you go, right, here's an enormous amount of money. Oh, you don't want to play anymore. Just keep it all. See ya. Like, guys, how are you going to run a business this way? Is it any wonder eventually the chickens had to come home to roost? Like, it was always going to happen eventually. So to me, I don't buy even the angle, Monty, a team that hasn't given a fuck about Counter-Strike since 2016. I'm supposed to believe now, no, it's all right, we're going to go into CSGO. Remember this detail, guys, because this is key. Remember a couple of years ago when Reginald made that stupid tweet saying he'll never let the team get like CLG. He meant in LCS. That's the only context he could have meant. And he said he would sell his car, his house. You can't then 2 or 3 years later go, I never really cared about League anyway. It's not a big deal in my business. I'm doing fine. I'm going to move into CSGO, a game I've actively ignored for 6 or 7 years. Like the whole TSM thing to me is just it's like a house of cards and it's just falling down now, mate.
I mean, I agree with what TSM is doing from a business perspective. That's the thing, is like, it makes total sense, but also Reginald just straight up lied to his own fan base about what he was doing and what his passion was and his willingness to potentially lose money. And the lies just kept going. Like, he lied about that, you know, sacrificing everything personally in order to keep this team online. It's just like shocking misspending of money, like spending $6 million on an ultra washed Sword Art that like we knew was ultra washed. And then remember, the reason why Doublelift wasn't on that roster was because Reginald was spitefully punishing Doublelift because Doublelift, committed, then said, oh, I'm not going to commit to being on TSM unless you get Sword Art. And Reginald was like, fuck you, got Sword Art. And Doublelift was like, can I be on the team? And Reginald said, no, fuck you. Like, it was spiteful from him. So that's the reason why that didn't happen. And then this is just, I do have to say, Thorin, this is just, I tweeted this. This is so poetic, but isn't it absolutely incredible that TSM's League of Legends team was ultimately destroyed by one of their fans who turned out to be, I know this is really uncommon for TSM fans, a fraud and a liar. Because what happened, guys, is that Sam Bankman-Fried was a giant League of Legends and TSM fan, and he came and he promised them $210 million over 10 years in order to sponsor the team. And what happened was that money was a Ponzi scheme, and Sam Bankman-Fried is going to prison. And ultimately, what's funny too is that TSM lied about the FTX deal not affecting their revenue and not affecting their plans. Like, you can't tell me, this is so absurd. You cannot tell me that you would be trying to sell the LCS slot if Sam Bankman-Fried was not a fraud, if you were receiving $20 million a year, and your sponsor cares about the League of Legends team. You would spend money on it because you have the money, and that's what the sponsor wants to see. If you guys remember, it was a big deal when FTX came in, because what happened was that TSM announced that their team was going to be called TSM FTX, and they were going to have the sponsorship, particularly with the League of Legends team. And then Riot had to come out and say, no, you're not. Like, they didn't even clear the sponsor with Riot at the time. And they said, no, you're not. You cannot do this because we have markets where cryptocurrency can't be advertised. Like, if they're broadcasting in China and you're calling the team TSM FTX, like, that is against Chinese and potentially other countries' broadcast regulations. Whereas if LCS just has like the FTX gold graph, they can send a clean feed of the stream with a different overlay to a different country, right? So it allows them to control things. But they had to come out and say, no, you cannot be called TSM FTX, even though that is what TSM sold FTX, guys. That is what they sold them. So already there were problems within that relationship because TSM was not going to be able to deliver what they sold because it was not cleared with Riot in advance. Like, they did a really bad job of that. And now that they don't have that money, there's no universe where we can believe that what TSM said was true. That look, man, I don't know a company of that size. Like, what's TSM's valuation? $400 million or whatever.
That's what they always claim. Yeah,
that's what they claim. But if you have a $400 million company and you suddenly lose $200 million of revenue over 10 years, that just from a business perspective, that is an enormous blow to your company. And also, by the way, guys, that $400 million valuation probably included that $20 million a year in revenue. It probably included that deal, which means their valuation has probably fallen pretty significantly from that point as well. So, they were abused by FTX, but at the same time, like, given their shitty fan base, isn't it so perfect that one of their fans ultimately ended up destroying the budget for the LCS team? And there's no other way to view this, guys. There's no, like, you cannot believe the constant lies that come out of TSM. It's just a cycle of abuse. The fans abusing them abusing their fans forever, back and forth.
I would also say as well, like, the other reason why it doesn't make sense to be like, the FTX deal won't affect us much, then why announce it like an enormous deal? Which one is it? At the end of the day, if you announce it and it's a historic deal with loads of money that you're going to do loads of things with, hence the point of having the deal, you can't then, when you don't get it, go, well, it's no big deal, it's not going to really affect things at all. Well, then you were lying in the first place. So you pick which the lie is, but one of them's a lie. You can't both be true. They're not congruent statements, are they? And then I'd also throw this in there as well, which is, just as an aside, because a lot of people have had this happen to them the last few years. This is where people, I think it's going to be years before people with their brain can actually characterize what crypto is, Monty. People keep treating it like a standard asset, like it was a house or a Ferrari. And so what happens is when people have millions of crypto, they start to talk in the way Reginald did of like, I can do anything and nothing can ever hit me and I can never be taken down. Because one thing people never stop and think about is, if you look at the way this was set up, I mean, previously people know someone like Doublelift famously had even said he'd had some crypto stolen from him and like the FBI was involved or something. If you think of who Reggie is and the way Reggie's done his career and through all the new tech stuff and the fact he had a sponsorship from FTX, I'm just going to speculate. I bet he had loads of money in crypto. I bet he had millions and millions. And if he had millions and millions and that all went away like that, then he had to think very differently about his business too.
Guess where his crypto wallet was, Thorin?
Exactly. What do you think? It would be logical, wouldn't it?
It was on FTX.
Yeah, it would be logical. It'd be totally logical. So there might even be a scenario where you've just lost it all. And so now you have to think very differently about the business. And also, the other thing to tie into what you said, which really actually just reveals what TSM always was. Richard loves that line, to quote everyone's using at the moment because of the recession that's incoming, where you say it's only when the tide goes out you see who's swimming naked. That's what you're finding out about TSM. Even though they bragged for all these years about how they made profitable, what you're finding out is not the LCS team, not these other squads. Here's the thing. If you do have a healthy business based around guides and your agency and stream, then that's the part you keep when you need to trim stuff. And the first thing you trim, by the way, this is what you should think about, guys. The first thing you trim is the least valuable part of your business. That actually implies TSM doesn't think LCS is worthwhile. So the actual more alarming thing is, one, this shows that TSM was mismanaged. But I would also say this, because it ties into some of the things I know you've heard behind the scenes. Have you noticed, of all the big orgs, you hear these rumors they're going to sell, or they're desperate for VC, or they're going to go bust, or they're going to have to downsize massively? Have you noticed how many of them are LCS teams, Monty? It's a lot of them. Like, it's actually, I don't know why. I mean, this has been a discussion we've had on the show for the last few years about viewership and things like that. Is the league appealing? But it feels like a lot of the owners, and this is big, remember, guys, because LCS was the origin of franchising. There would be no LEC franchising if it hadn't have been LCS first. The premise was, when they franchised the LCS, this is the most logical, best region to franchise because of all the sponsorship dollars and all the history. And what this is actually showing, quite frankly, it's a bit disturbing to me, is actually, if you look at these teams, I get the vibe a lot of them are sort of over the LCS thing. It's not as bad as Overwatch League, but a lot of them, it seems almost are just like, maybe I don't want to sit on my slot, or as we said before, maybe I want to sell while it has still a current value. That's more than, especially if you like CLG, like you said. It's why, if people don't know, Astralis last year was rumored to be one of the teams trying to sell. Because if you ever look how much Astralis, even just with your little guesstimate budget, have done, like CLG, they probably could have cashed out on a profit from their LCS experience, which obviously is pretty rare. Normally we think of team orgs just bleeding money. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's also why people want to leave. They want to leave while there's still a greater fool to buy your slot for 20 mil or whatever, and then you end up not having lost stuff for the last 5 years, maybe.
I mean, it just depends on, like I said, what your goals are. I don't necessarily think it's a greater fool if you feel like you're playing a long game and don't mind losing some money in the short term in order to play a 20-year long plus esports or longer. Like, if you really think that you can build up a competent staff of people to help you guide you through the universe of esports, if you're an outside investor, and you will be able to retain those people by treating them well, and you're going to be able to spend aggressively during this time to build brand equity, to like, you know, work with ESL on Counter-Strike and work with Riot on League of Legends, and then be ready for when the next game strikes and make yourself into a premier brand, then I think it can be good, because we all know, regardless of this recession, eventually there's going to be a new game, or eventually there's going to be profitability. And certainly in Counter-Strike right now, you know that ESL doesn't care so much about losing money, because they want to spend in order to get audience size, which benefits you as a team. So I think there's definitely a world where savvy investors, if they're on a long enough timeline, can get their money back. But if you don't have that same dedication, then yeah, now is the time to get out. And I mentioned this, it was hilarious. I actually mentioned that CLG was for sale yesterday on Power Spike, and then the news dropped in the afternoon. But the other teams that have been exploring, you know, finding buyers are teams like Dignitas, you know, teams like Immortals. These are teams that potentially are for sale. It wouldn't surprise me if Golden Guardians was as well, though I'm not entirely sure about that. Who knows what Evil Genius's status right now is too, considering the drama that has occurred. Like,
it would also be a
I
convenient way to wash the brand, wouldn't it? Just sell it.
Yep. Yeah,
You know?
exactly. So, but you know, some of these teams have now hired banks to like find buyers and broker deals among their clients. So, like, this is happening, and the rumor is that CLG is going to be bought by NRG, and NRG is a team that was formerly within League of Legends, and they have extensive esports experience. Their CEO Andy Miller is one of the owners of the Sacramento Kings. He owns the San Francisco Shock in the Overwatch League. He was just franchised in Valorant, so they made NRG a partner team, and they also have a pretty large like TikTok brand called Full Squad Gaming that has done, you know, maybe like 100 million views on TikTok with various short form content. But Andy is a very good owner. I really, really like Andy. I worked with him very extensively throughout the years, and he obviously sees an opportunity to continue growing the NRG brand, and he has a diversified business with some pretty like huge influencers, people that, you know, most of our audience wouldn't pay attention to, which is like, you know, Minecraft influencers and stuff like that. But I think he obviously sees the value here, and I think he understands that this is a chance to potentially buy low compared to the rest of, you know, what it could be in the future, because all these teams are trying to get out, and they're going to take, you know, one of these teams is going to take an offer that he gives. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good ownership group to have in. And in fact, guys, they're a better ownership group to have in the LCS than fucking Madison Square Garden.
Oh, they are. And I'll even
like,
say
it's
this.
actually an upgrade. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
If you just look at how they behaved in the other games, unlike the CLG team, notice I made the point there that when this ownership group came in, you didn't have the superstars on CLG anymore. That's when Afromu was gone, and that's when Doublelift was gone, and they were all gone. It's just after that it was the budget rosters. NRG have shown in the games they care about. Here's a very good sign. They don't buy into games to min-max. They buy into games to be the best. Like in Counter-Strike, if people don't know, they sold the squad that went to Evil Geniuses. They were like second. Yep. They were top 4 at the majors right before they sold. They had one of the best teams in the world. They had in, obviously, Overwatch League. If people don't know, they had the best team for years and years. And they were the ones who spent all that money on those like young guys who became the studs. Sadly, obviously, we don't mention some of the names now.
They also really invest in coaches and infrastructure, like famously Krusty, the coach in Overwatch. They
basically headhunted the best coach, yes. Paid him a massive amount.
Insanely good. Like probably one of the best coaches in all of esports. And they, you know, they very like carefully, you know, developed him and the rest of the team and trusted him. So they don't have like a super like they don't meddle too much, right? They find the people they believe in, and then they empower those people. So like if it's true that NRG is coming in, I think it's better. Like it frankly is a big upgrade, because we know that Madison Square Garden didn't really give a fuck.
Yeah, to me, the thing is, the difference is I could actually see this brand becoming one of the top brands now, and then buying up the big, like maybe this is where some like Jensen plays now who wants the big contract, but he can't get it from the 2 or 3 teams that'll still pay a big contract, you know. So in that sense, that is a good point. I actually do think it's one of the better owners. If people don't know, I actually have an interview with him on my channel from a few years ago. He has a really interesting backstory, because he used to work, for example, literally under Steve Jobs at Apple. Like he had a mega interesting backstory.
He was the VP at Apple.
if you ever listen to the interview I do, he's one of those guys who actually straddles the line very well between like respecting OG people. It's actually why he did an interview with me. He already knew who I was. He was aware of different spaces in the industry, but also, like I say, I don't get the sense he wants just all the properties. He wants certain ones that he thinks the league spots make sense. And then the idea is, right, I've committed, so now you spend the money. Now you try and make it something big. So I think it should be a better team than CLG was. The TSM one's the bomber because let's be real, as you pointed out earlier, CLG brand was hotshot and that or double lift, and that died off years ago. Like we're talking half a decade at least. The difference is you cannot lose TSM from the LCS and still say it's the LCS in the same way. Like TSM is the brand. I don't even care if you want to see how powerful the brand is, guys. They haven't won beyond the bullshit online one for many, many years, and beyond that, they haven't even had the superstars for years, and they still have the idiots who chant the chant every international tournament. They still have the old school fans, dude. They still have people where this is how you know on one level Reggie did kill it with his brand. People are still, including us, obsessed with Reggie's brand within TSM. Like, almost Reggie is the brand of TSM at this point in time. There's nothing left. So when you lose a franchise like that, even if the best org in the world, let's say like Real Madrid bought a team for some reason, Monty, and they said, right, we're going to even buy all the best players. We're going to buy, like a Team Liquid super team. Here's the difference. They wouldn't be Real Madrid from football in LCS tomorrow. So the LCS, like just the momentum and inertia of the TSM brand, that is a tragedy to lose. That was historic, mate.
Sure. I mean, we'll see if it even sells. Like, frankly, we know
no one will buy it, I think.
Yeah, frankly, we know that TSM can operate this roster on minimum salaries for a long time. Like, if they just don't spend money on the team and they just offer, LCS minimum for their next round of contracts, they can just field a 9th, 10th place team or whatever, or try and get creative with the GMing. So, I think they can take that loss pretty effectively. If they're running their entire league team for under $1 million a year, then they're going to be totally fine.
Let me give you a counterpoint, though. No one's come with this angle yet, I've noticed. I watched a couple of the people discussing this topic. No one's got this angle. Because remember, unlike the CLG, Monty, this is Reggie's team. And Reggie, as you pointed out with the double lift case, Reginald's probably one of the most ridiculous people of all time for cutting off his nose to spite his face. Like, he doesn't give a... If he wants to be petty... I can align with him on this one. He'll just be petty, whether it costs him millions, whether it doesn't, right? So one thing I will say is this is what no one else has shaded in here. Remember, Riot still has Reggie's balls in their fucking vice grip with that investigation. He's not allowed to do shit. He has to sit back. Like, while he's getting all the flame, that's his fault. He has to sit back and not do anything, which already was really hard. This is a guy who always interfered for years and years. And then here's the angle no one thinks about. TSM didn't get accepted to that partnership program in Valorant, guys. Everyone thought, it's TSM, it's Riot, of course, the synergies make sense. Of course, they'll be there with Cloud9. No, in fact, as Monty points out, people like NRG got the spots. People who aren't even from League. And when they didn't give that to TSM, dude, that was like a slap in the face for me. That was like Riot almost saying, you know what, Reggie, if you're not League of Legends, maybe I don't love me some Reggie. Go fuck yourself. So if I'm Reggie, there's also a world where it's like, if I have to trim or I have to cut out, maybe fuck LCS. Maybe Riot's not my partner anymore. Maybe I'm going to try and be on the open circuit of CSGO or something.
I mean, I think it is a dangerous game for him to play because his apps for Blitz in Valorant and League of Legends require API access from Riot, which I'm actually very surprised that they didn't punish him by removing his API access to League of Legends when all of his drama was unfolding. The way they chose to punish him was by not giving him a Valorant partnership instead. Now, probably there's some sort of contract that they have, and maybe Riot couldn't get out of the contract. Maybe they almost certainly are getting paid for that API access.
Oh, I'm sure they get a percentage or something. Yeah,
I mean, or a flat fee. Who knows? But maybe that. But when that contract is up, the question is, will Riot renew that contract? Especially because the Blitz app is actually losing usefulness for a lot of people. Like, recommending runes is now something that's done within the client of League of Legends.
Okay.
And they've made draft anonymous, so you can't really see people's accounts during the draft phase, which was one of the key features of it as well. And I mean, it has jungle timers, but as Dom pointed out on Power Spike, like other apps also do that. So it's not. I feel like there's fewer and fewer reasons to actually use that application, and especially because it's a resource hog on your PC, because how they make money is they constantly play fucking video ads all the time in the background of your computer while the app is open. It's extremely annoying.
While you're playing the game, ads play.
Well, it's muted video. I mean, it's the same
Oh,
bullshit.
right.
Here's what they do, Thorin. They go to advertisers. They're like, we could sell all these video ads. Nobody ever watches them because it's literally sitting behind the game while you're playing the game.
Right.
And so their entire business is basically fraudulent extortion of advertisers selling video ads to people who are never actually going to watch them. It's the same shit that, the wikis do when they like play video ads or Twitch streams at the very bottom muted
Oh,
that no
yes.
one ever
Autoplay.
sees.
Yes.
Yeah, it's scamming advertisers. It's a very common business in the
Sure.
internet, but I mean, they're pros at scamming advertisers across their website network, across their apps. Nobody ever fucking watches these ads. Like, don't be ridiculous. Um, you know, I don't personally care that they're scamming advertisers, but it's not high on my list of like super unethical things to do. But we love, you can see, we love our advertisers here. We don't do that. That's not our game. But yeah, I think like this whole thing from what Riot's been doing and the changes they've made to their games, like Blitz has made a business off of Riot being bad at making their own client, and Riot's getting better at that. So what's their business then? Because it's obviously not esports. They think it's going to be Counter-Strike. And do you even know where they're going? Are they going to buy FaZe's roster now that FaZe is in trouble? Like, what are they doing?
That would be the interesting angle, because if it's not FaZe, that's the problem, Monty. If it isn't FaZe, because obviously for financial reasons, FaZe just might be forced to sell what might be again the best CS:GO team. If it isn't FaZe, then logically, I don't think it can be a top team. That's why I wonder about the fact that they've sort of bragged, like even the way they phrased this was so sus, Monty. Because when they when they had to sort of announce they're probably going to downsize league, the way they span it was like, we're going to go even harder in CS:GO, right? And they said some really ominous line that was like that the project in CS:GO would be more than all the games they were shutting down combined. Did you see this line? It was like some really interesting phrasing. Well, here's the problem with that, in my opinion, Monty. I think there's some fuckery involved with that, because that's to make you think, wait a minute, CS:GO isn't as big salaries as LCS. Like, holy shit, they're going to buy the best team in the world and pay them. Here's my angle on that. In the modern day, to actually be a functional top team in CS:GO, unless you're just godlike at building rosters, you've got to have all the partnership spots. You've got to be in the Lufa agreement. You've got to be a Blast partner. Evil Geniuses has showed us, guys, because if you don't know, in ESL Pro League, the Lufa agreement won, and in Blast, which you start as a group stage team if you're in the partnership, they've been last place for like 2 or 3 years now. But the point is, because they're in there, it still gets you ranking points, still gets you in the public eye, you still get to seem like you're relevant. So I suspect that's why they're going to have to spend a lot of money. I think they're going to actually buy like a slot and buy the actual league slots with it, Monty, not just the actual players, because that's what in theory would cost you the money, right? That's what might cost you $1 million or something. Someone selling the actual slot, as not just the players. So if they do that, then yeah, maybe it could be a good team. But I'm worried that it might just be they buy the slots and then put in a cheap team, because like I say, in CS:GO, people don't want to sell the good rosters. Like, the whole point is not a space that makes loads of money. So aside from FaZe, I'd struggle to see who would be available. Like, the rest of the teams, also right now in CS:GO, quite frankly, because of the way we went back to from online to offline play, it upset a lot of the hierarchies. Like, I'll give you an example. Back in the day, if you saw a name like Kenny S, you'd sign him instantly. Nowadays, Kenny S isn't Kenny S. But similarly, there's players who were top players who were nobody a year and a half ago. So I also think this is probably the trickiest time ever to buy into CS:GO. There are lineups in the top 10 that like no one predicted would be and might not be in 6 months. So it's not like the old days where there was names like basically any team with Carragher, anyone with Keria, anyone with... There's teams before you could just guarantee these teams to be pretty good, and you could sort of like not know too much, but know, right, that's the sort of like level I want to be at. Like Evil Geniuses lineup, like they bought in the perfect time. They just bought a top team that was obviously good. They had a very good track record, and they bought them for a reasonable price. So I have my concerns, because obviously TSM's been out of CS:GO for so long. Like, will they understand this space? But whatever. At least they're buying a team. At least they're doing something.
Yeah, they also just like massively mismanaged the roster when they had the old Astralis core. In the last iteration of CS:GO, they didn't promote them at all. They meddled with the roster and the manager of the team, which is, they like fired the manager, which then pissed off all the players because they all liked their manager. And Reggie literally came in and was basically like, why are you here? I can do this job better than you can, and fired their manager, even though they were all in fucking Europe and the players liked the manager that they had operating the team. Which then pissed the players off. And then obviously that team went on to become the Astralis team that won like a gazillion majors and had a huge legacy. So, but I mean, I remember at the time the CS fans were all pissed because like their league team was doing super shitty in that era. Like this was like the Team Liquid dominance era of the LCS.
No, you're mixing up there. The TSM had the Straw Slap in 2015, mate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this was in so it was when CLG was doing very well. Was when they had the Astralis roster, and TSM was not on top of the league, and meanwhile their Counter-Strike team was starting to like place very highly at international events. And I remember all the Counter-Strike fans being like, why won't they promote this on their social media, because this team is actually an internationally competitive team, and their league team, from a Counter-Strike fan's perspective, the LCS teams are a joke because they never do anything in international competition. Yep. Meanwhile, if you have one of the best Counter-Strike teams in the world, they were confused as to why they were not promoting them very actively on their social.
And also, just for the hilarity of it, if you're a League of Legends fan, here's how that story ended. The core of that team went on to be the greatest team of all time. The in-game leader that they kicked now is the FaZe in-game leader, who's one of the greatest teams of all. Like, essentially, any decision that wasn't the one that TSM took would have yielded true greatness and a mega lineage in Counter-Strike, which, as you say, the difference is, in League of Legends, best case scenario for LCS is like Team Liquid. You fluke like one big final, but you're not going to win it, In CSGO, you could actually have had the best team of all time. It could have been
what's so hilarious about this is just part of the curse of being Reginald, is he spent all those years saying, our goal is to win worlds. Our goal is to win worlds in League of Legends. You literally could have been the T1 of Counter-Strike. You could have won the equivalent of worlds. You could have won a bunch of majors. You could have won a bunch of tournaments, and you just fucked it up. You just fucked it up.
Put it this way, I'm not exaggerating. You can go now. If you go to the esports earning website and you go onto CSGO, right? Obviously, of the 5 people might know, the one that doesn't make it anymore is Gen.G, he retired years ago. The other 4 players, the 3 that are in Astralis until recently, and Carrigan, are all top 10 players of all time for prize money won. And the majority of that was after Reginald had them. So, like I say, you couldn't have zigged when he should have zagged more. And the funniest thing is this: if people don't know, he did it for very, very short-term reasons, which is correctly, that year, 2015, was the year that salaries essentially almost exponentially grew, Monty. They went from everyone's on 2K a month to someone's offering 7K to an LCS all comes in for 15K to then some Eastern European one does 20K. And the problem was, the fear at the time from people like Reggie was the salaries are getting out of control and you don't get enough back in terms of branding. How did LCS work out, dickhead? How did Payne Hooney millions work out, dickhead? What are you doing? He's paid Sword Art $3 million or something. How did that work out? What brand did you ever build? What awesome series was he ever a part? You know what I mean? The joke is, I get what Reginald meant in the short term, but you actually did a worse version of that on a bigger scale and with way worse results. The ROI was 10 times worse on the fucking Sword Art deal, wasn't it? Like we're saying, the one thing at least you get with the TSM Astralis players was they were going to be the greatest in the game of all time. That counts for a lot. You can, if you do it right, by the way, with your branding, you can, much like the CLGs of the world, you can ride that branding for years after you're good. People will still remember fondly the time you had the top team.
Here's a spoiler for you guys. We just actually saw Astralis's financials for the quarter, because they are a publicly traded company now. And you know what? They're profitable. They're fucking profitable. They're a publicly traded esports company that only does esports, and they're fucking profitable, guys. They've actually sold the sponsorships. We may not like the Astralis management very much, but there is no question that they have made a profitable esports org, which is commendable. It's commendable.
Oh, the one thing you cannot say, by the way, is you can dislike Nicola Nyom and people like that, but he's done a very good job in business. In fact, that's one of the things I don't like about him. I think he just does it in a fucked up way, but the problem is he gets the results, doesn't he? So I can get why, sadly, other people who are, let's say, have looser morals can look past that and just go, good business job or whatever. If people don't know, by the way, just as a random aside, I have never, ever, unlike everyone else, I've never disputed that thing Nihom said publicly about me to get back at us for Flashpoint, where he said that there was an owner within Flashpoint described to me as being just having nominally good ideas, but being annoying or something. I can guarantee some of those motherfuckers thought that. I don't think that's one of the few times I don't think Nihom was lying. I think he was telling the truth. It wouldn't surprise me that some of them think that. I mean, I was in some of the meetings, mate. They weren't feeling it. That's all I'll tell you. Could easily believe that.
That is actually one of my favorite quotes about you all all time is so fucking.
You remember,
funny.
I even put it in my bio at one
Yeah.
point, and I think I do have it on the quote section of my website. Like, you know, like I put those comedic quotes.
Yeah.
I think I've got it on there because I thought, fuck. Because here's the thing: if people don't know, one of my favorite authors, Robert Anton Wilson, used to do that as a marketing ploy. If someone wrote a scathing review, he'd take the craziest sentence and pretend it was like a movie poster, and that was like a good review. So, say someone said, like, you know, he is like a guerrilla ontologist waiting to leap from the bushes and assault the viewer's intellect. He would just put that like it was like the sick like tag, like the movie of the summer. Yeah, it's banging, mate. And also, just imagine, like, that's why I did it on my website with all those slasher quotes. Just imagine how pissed off the person is when they read it as well. Like, wait a minute, what the hell? No, I meant that like negatively, exactly. Like, it's a way to like needle the fucker who's getting you as well. Because if people don't know, if you ever want just a laugh, go on my website, like esportshistorian.gg or whatever. And on the quotes part that you can click through, I've even set them up so that it goes like this. For example, there'll be one where like it'll be like simple saying Thorin is an idiot, right? And then I put Thorin is an idiot. Then it goes like simple, the greatest player of all time, according to Thorin. So you get the joke I've built in there, which is if I'm an idiot, well, how come I'm the one who said he was the greatest? Like, think it through. So I've done loads of gag ones like that. I've got one with Slasher where it's like, former respected journalist who's like banned from Reddit or something. Like, I got loads of little roasts in there. I got some good ones. It's a little gem. Put out with some sleepers there for your boys.
The one from Zeus is Twitter too. Thorin is a great person and a competent analyst. Almost every pro player thinks he is a nice fellow and he understands CS quite well.
Do you know why that one's brilliant, by the way?
Tough guy from Shaquille O'Neal.
Here's why the Zeus one's genius, because he's trying to parody what I said. Because I said about Zeus, like, he's a great in-game leader. He's just a bot as a player. So Zeus, to try and tag me, wrote that whole thing. But he did write that, Monty. It's not my fault that when he put it on there, the context lost. Like, it just looks like one of the greatest in-game leaders of all time. Paid me a beautiful compliment. So, you know what? Thanks. Yeah, we'll be putting that on our website. Good luck. Basically, don't ever try and be sarcastic against me now, because I've got your bank to rights, haven't I?
Brian Kibler, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole.
There you
Amazing.
go. Pretty good, isn't it? I took that. Like I say though, I stole that from Robert Underwood. So I don't even pretend I invented that. It's good bants, though.
It's
definitely
good
bants.
Super funny though.
Definitely.
I'm trying to find the one. The anonymous quote one is so funny.
Which one was that?
No, the one about nominally good ideas.
Oh, yes, that one, yeah. Maybe I didn't put it on there. If I haven't, I definitely should.
There's actually a lot. Anyway, it's funny. You guys can go to esportshistorian.gg and check it out.
Here we go. I've got it. Here's the quote, because this quote is fucking amazing, by the way.
It is.
It says, this is the quote. Thorin is an unstable and deeply troubled character, but a key to winning over the core and has nominally good ideas. Like, that just sounds sick, doesn't it? That even sounds like he's describing like an anime character or something, doesn't it? It's ridiculous.
What I love about that too is that it's just it's so patronizing to the esports audience too, like, because it insults you and then says like, what's wrong with the esports audience that they like you, but you're essential to winning over the core.
I'll also just throw this out there, guys. Have you noticed how none of these owners ever say anything bad about Jake Lockie or any of the actual clout chair? Weird how that works. Oh, what's that? They've got the new jersey and they're wearing it in their video. Oh, well, don't anyone put 2 and 2 together. Fucking hell, boys. The industry's so mad, isn't it? It's so mad.
Well, and to tie this all up, guys, on this conversation about orgs in general, is like, this is just what you're going to see right now. I don't know how many times we can just talk about this. If you guys watched our Four Horsemen our Four Horsemen show with Tommy Lurpus from last year about the business of esports, a lot of this was foreshadowed. And if anything, it's gotten, worse than we expected with like the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, the drying up of VC, advertising budgets being frozen, which is hurting a lot of teams right now because they obviously rely on these advertising budgets. But here's the truth of the esports industry right now is sponsors don't get value out of these advertisements. One of the reasons that we are currently, and you guys will see, doing well with Last Free Nation in terms of closing ad deals is because a lot of the teams like just don't offer value from an advertising perspective. Like what they give you, they take millions of dollars because they have millions of dollars of player fees.
Let
and
me give you a
staff
quick
fees to pay.
example, Monty. I thought this the other day with the video you're referencing. So I open up a video. Remember, I don't get to see a lot of Travis's content because I'm pretty hardcore enthusiast. I'm not really about like Hotline League or whatever. So I opened that video about CLG and it starts and he goes, by the way, sponsored by Alienware. It's like, that's nothing. Like, mate, what you just said there, no human ever is buying an Alienware laptop because you just said really quickly, sponsored by Alienware. That may as well be nothing. Like, that may as well just be a logo on the screen that everyone looks past. Because if you look at things that are always there, you just look at the essential, the person moving. Like that's almost what, it's an extreme example, but that's almost the vibe of a lot of the team orgs. They're stuck 10 years in the past, aren't they? Where it's just like, we are sponsored by this person, but it doesn't like tangibly or materially change what you're doing. It's not tailored to them, really.
All I'm going to say is compare our ad reads to everybody else's. Just think about that. And thank you guys for supporting our sponsors too, because it is the best way you can support our channel and our content. And you guys have actually crushed it. Freeze Pipe is back. They're back for more, guys. They loved it. You guys bought the Freeze Pipes. Thank you. We're happy to get products you guys enjoy, and you're going to see more. But the point is that the advertisers are not seeing the value. Like when you look at LCS, they lost State Farm, they lost Bud Light. These were companies that are huge institutions, but you have to justify millions of dollars of expenditure, and it's not worth it for the teams or the league to take smaller deals because to put on the LCS is extraordinarily expensive. So they have to have big deals, right? And to hire all these staff and players and pay them, 7 figures each a year is very, very expensive. So you have to have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars of sponsors. But the question is, what do the sponsors get in return? Here's what they get. They get some surly ass professional players who don't want to make content, not doing a good job of representing the product, right? And then go look at EG's YouTube channel and tell me if those 2,000 views on a video are getting a sponsor any kind of value. And they slap a logo on their jersey. That's it, guys. I can tell you that's what teams do. They offer very, very little alternative value as if you're just sponsoring the esports team. And
when people are trying to make fun of me and they say my channel's died, Monty, because the views went down loads. Yeah, people aren't paying me millions of dollars a year to sponsor my channel, though, are they? Like, the point is, as you say, they get the same output from an entire media company. Like, that's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah, and so this is how the teams operate, and many teams are not putting a lot of effort into their content, or content at least that resonates with the fans. They pay content teams to make it all shiny and polished, but it's not popular content, guys. It's not popular. So, where do you go with this kind of business? It's very hard. I mean, the answer is you take smaller sponsorship and you slash player salaries. And that's literally what has to happen. There is no way that a player, like a professional player, should be paid $1 million a year to play in the LCS based on the current viewership and the value that you can derive from sponsorships. So unless there is an alternative form of revenue, unless Riot says, and by the way, Riot is paying stipends. They pay over $2 million a year in stipends to each of the LCS teams right now.
Which really says a lot if people are running at a loss after that, obviously, yeah.
So like this is, and also their new partnership program with Valorant, they've announced that they are paying teams in order to have those partnerships. Now you can get relegated in that system, right? So that it still requires investment from you. But this is there are subsidies that are going into this from the publishers, which there should be because it's a marketing exercise that the publishers have deemed is profitable to them. So this is how it should be. If anything, it should be more, right? But the sponsorship angle is very tough, I think, for teams right now, especially because this is the problem with burning sponsors in the industry, is that esports is now a cursed word among sponsors. Like when we go out to sell for Last Free Nation, we have to actively undo damage by saying like, no, we are doing this differently. No, we can guarantee, direct viewership of content because we have viewership floors. And here's how we pitch sponsors. Here's samples. We will make samples of how we pitch to you guys, right? But it's been tough. It's been really tough because all these teams, they just scooped up a bunch of money, made some bullshit, didn't care about the returns to the advertisers, and then the advertisers just get salty and leave.
Yeah, if people don't know, one of the things I actually found most disturbing from our experience with our company was you don't know, guys, what a game changer it is. That, like, our approach in general is we'll find a way to hit the number that you want. If this is the number of views you want, then look, we're selling you this package of this many shows and this many ad reads. But if for some reason we have a down month, we'll make it up other ways. We'll put in another show. We'll do a bonus. You can tell that esports companies don't do this, guys, because these brands are shocked when they hear this. They're like, oh, right, wow, oh, and there's nothing extra for that. Because what the other orgs are doing, like Monty says, is they think, well, I'm just in a market, and, that's what the ads cost. And if it doesn't make it, then so what? But unlucky. It's like, that's like that old saying that I always love to say, because esports people will never get it. You can shear a sheep many times, but you can skin it only once. This is like you're skinning the ad guy. And when he comes back and sees not only did you not hit his targets, you were nowhere close. And God forbid, by the way, he knows from other people in the market, you even did it in bad faith and you knew you'd never get those numbers and you sexed them up. As Monty's saying, he's going to be sour to the whole esports industry. He's definitely not going to want to work with your team anymore. And quite frankly, if it happens enough times, they're going to think the whole region, the whole area, just con artists and people just tricking them and selling, which is actually what esports used to be, selling the dream instead of the reality. Whereas actually the sad thing is, you can even tie it back in. People like TSM, Cloud9 have enormous fan bases. The question is just, are they engaging them appropriately? Do they know in the modern day how you don't just put the ad there, but you engage it with the viewer, make them interested, make them understand it, do it in your own unique way? That's the area a lot of these teams have failed. Like, a lot of them are just generic. It's why actually the CLG one's a good example, because once VC came in, a lot of these orgs don't really have a unique flair. They're not a cottage industry. They're just generic LCS org 4, generic LCS org 5, and the only difference is how much budget do they have to spend on players. Like, there's very little distinct branding. You can even say, quite frankly, with some of the repurchases, some of the brands are so bland, it's unbelievable. Like, what is Dignitas' brand? What is Immortal's brand? Nothing. All you think of is the performance of the team. No one can even tell me what makes these teams unique. It's actually why the one thing, like I said before, that I still gave credit to TSM was, at least they had the unique brand in terms of Reggie. Now they've thrown it down the drain, but that lasted a long time. Dude, they got a lot of goodwill from the community. We sort of let them ride for years on that shit.
Yeah. And it just makes you wonder if Hotshot had still been around and active within CLG, because people still love CLG because of shit that was happening in like 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011. Like, this was the kind of prime era of CLG. And a lot of that, it's just shocking to me because I love the CLG brand. That's one of the reasons why I joined CLG, because they were the opposite of TSM. They were supposed to be, the more mature team, the older team. Like, while TSM was burning down their house with a microwave and trying to play into, oh, these are a bunch of teenagers, like CLG was much more put together and stable, but still fun. And like, Hotshot was a great personality. And it was the little things too. Like, it was Matcom, the manager, who was a great artist, who was drawing like those weekly, the weekly drawings of the like the post-match drawings for wins and losses about the champions that were played, and the storyline of the game that were really fun and engaging to the community, and all that just fucking left. It's disappointing, but the brand really suffered at the hands of Madison Square Garden. So, frankly, I would rather them just take the CLG brand behind the shed and kill it right now and get something new within the LCS, because there's no value. The only value is nostalgia. Let's be real. The logo fucking sucks. The name fucking sucks. Counter Logic Gaming, it doesn't mean anything. So let's just be done with it and put it into the annals of history where we can remember it fondly, but not see it in its current zombie state any longer. Same with TSM. Logo sucks. Name sucks. Doesn't even mean Team Solo Mid anymore. Do we really lose? Like, we don't lose a lot from the branding perspective. We just lose a lot from the nostalgia and brand value perspective. But we can do better, as in most cases with these esports team. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's about all that's it to say. You guys are going to see more of this. Like, this isn't the last team to sell.
Oh, loads more.
We're going to see consolidation across the entire industry. There are going to be a bunch of good people getting in as well. Like, good business people will see this as an opportunity. They will see it as an opportunity, and people who are kind of half in, half out on this, or who have other, who want to be profitable immediately, like Madison Square Garden, are going to be out. And that's fine. We don't want those people in the space anyway. Like, I wish Madison Square Garden had never gotten into the space in the first place. But I don't think this is going to be a massive crisis. The reason why you are hearing this alarmism from people like Travis Gafford is that Travis is scared shitless for himself. His entire income depends on the success of the LCS. That's it. So he is scared because of what's going on, and he has a very strong motivation to convince people to stay with the LCS. It's the same reason he was like promoting that show Players. It's the same reason he's been talking about, the LCS in general, because if LCS viewership goes down, what happens to Travis? Right? Like,
basically Travis is that bird on the back of the rhino that eats the fleas. So he knows if there's no rhino anymore, not any fucking fleas for Travis, is there?
The rhino's getting smaller, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Less surface area for fleas.
Exactly. Because the other thing, I agree, because if people don't know, that's even one thing I always thought was such a waste. People talk about in League that Travis didn't maximize. Like, obviously, he could have done so much more. Like, even though he has something of a status in the community, he could have been the LCS guy. If he'd ever gone totally legit as a journalist, by the way, he would have had all the sources. He'd have had every story. Like I always say, it's why I brought it up with the Danny thing. Mate, if me and Richard over on the other side of the fucking planet, in theory, and also on some level, Richard doesn't even give a fuck about League of Legends. If we're finding stories out, you either are incompetent or you just don't report the stories, because you have to have gotten it before us. First of all, you dated the person who did the thing. You're friends with Doublelift who was involved with the other story. You know what I mean? Like, you have the direct sources. We just have those people if they speak to us. You have an extra level. But it's even worse than that. I always thought the silliest thing Travis ever did, Monty, was I know when I used to work with him, it was discussed many times of would he get into different games? Maybe he'd branch into Overwatch when it came, because that was going to be in LA too. I'm sure at some point Valorant was something. I don't know why he never did it, mate. To me, it was obvious you should have expanded like I did and do 2 or 3 games.
See what he does.
Because the best thing about doing 2 or 3 games is you can never get fucked by your game dying. Your game can't be StarCraft 2 and suddenly shrink. Like, you're always, or HOTS or something that gets closed down. If that happens, you start at 0 when you go to some of the other games. You got to do it while you're at your peak, you just gradually extend out.
Well, here's Thorin. VCT Americas is happening right now in the same studio that LCS happens in.
Does he come with Valorant? Does anyone know?
Days. I don't know. I'm just saying he might have to work more than 2 or 3 days a week, which may be a deal breaker for him. But he certainly could get a press badge and start going and interviewing Valorant players as well. I don't really know what's stopping him from doing that. Seems like it's pretty easy. Just go there Saturday and Sunday. You used to do that anyway. For LCS. Just go Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday now. I don't know. Seems easy to me.
But all he's going to do is go up to the venue, stand outside the doors, and just whisper like fucking Alibaba. So it'll just be like, sponsored by Alienware. Oh, the door didn't open. The door didn't open. A red carpet didn't roll out. And then I wasn't escorted inside and literally given an interview with the best player in the world, told by Riot that they had to do an interview with me. This is bullshit, this game. I'm out. Back to LCS. Like, there's sort of a little meta joke there. People know the industry a bit better than just a fan. So, because if you don't know, by the way, Travis also, it's not just his fault. He has the same problem the LCS owners have. They want it all on easy mode. They all want it all handed to them. And I'll tell you what, not only in business are you not going to ever get it handed to you, boys, but as a journalist, you're never going to get anything handed to you. As a journalist, the joke is the people we need to help us the most are often actively hostile because they're the people we're reporting on. The point is, the guy I report on tomorrow was the guy who's my source today. That's why it's the most fraught industry. That's also why, in my opinion, when you look at the way people do it, Travis has actually shown that his method doesn't work. Because if his method works, Monty, where you never rock the boat and you never upset anyone and you never leak the wrong thing, he should have every source and every story. Why is it the people who only rock the boat, who only interfere, who only expose the things you don't want to expose? Why do we get all the stories? I've always thought that's one thing you got. Surely that penny drops eventually, mate, that you realise, wait, this doesn't even work for me. I'm not even getting what I wanted.
Yeah. It's wild.
It's weird. It's weird. What a weird world.
And like the reason why he has these sponsorships too, it's not that he's going out and selling them. He's represented by Loaded, which represents a lot of streamers. His very good friend Kelby from CLG is his agent at Loaded, and they're able to sell Alienware sponsorships because they sell them across a variety of clients, and they package Travis in with that deal. That's why he has it. I mean, that's fine. He has a good agent. Whatever. Like, but that's how it happens, right? That's how it happens. Shall we move on to games?
All right.
Now that we've spent an hour and 20 minutes on
what region should we talk
Winter?
About? That's the question. Which region do you want to talk
LCK?
About? Here's the thing. Let's do LCK first, just to switch it up and come back to LCS. Right. In LCK, it's exactly what I was waiting for the whole time, Monty. I have been waiting from the beginning of the playoffs to see Gen.G play against KT Rolster. That is my number one matchup I want to see the whole time. And not only is it here, but bro, you couldn't even make this more hype. Because on the one hand, we all know KT has shown you the ceiling. Now, don't worry, the floor's way lower than you've seen so far. It can definitely go wrong. But the problem is, suddenly Gen.G even looks a bit dodgy because of that fucking Hanwha Live series. Like, mate, it feels like it's coming together. I know this is something you've preached against, but I am excited for KT Rolster. Damn it, Monty.
Oh my God.
I am excited for a telecom war final. I believe.
I want the telecom war final as much as I love Gen.G. So Dom and I had a disagreement, and we talked about this at length on Power Spike. He thinks that it's going to be Gen.G winning. I think it's going, and I think it's going to be KT, which is a shocking reversal of opinion from Dom, who's a known Gen.G hater, and I'm a known Gen.G lover. I think Gen.G has actually played very well during the playoffs. Sometimes, man, fans just don't understand Gen.G. And I've talked about this on my streams about why they're good, but the fans literally have a problem where they think that if you are doing something off camera, they just have no object permanence, and they can't understand that teams do things on other parts of the map that they're not seeing.
They don't understand the map player, right? I say yes.
Like they can't look at CS numbers or gold leads, apparently.
Dude, I've always wondered about that, because here's the thing I don't get, Monty. Remember, most fans of League play League of Legends. Just imagine for a second, guys, that you were playing a game of League of Legends, and let's say you're a bot laner. On your part of the map, you're just fighting 2v2, right? Let's imagine every time you get past the mid game, there's just two waves pushing into your base at all times. Like, wouldn't it eventually twig? Like, that doesn't happen by no reason. There must be someone pushing you. You'd look eventually. Like, spoiler, I've just given you the whole clue to how Gen.G plays right there. If you understand what I just said, it's like Monty said, yeah, they're not doing the big team fight win that makes them win, but they're just fucking shitting on you by understanding the map.
And they're taking all your jungle camps.
Yeah,
but this is the solo queue mentality. So it's true though that this is how solo queue players think. So let's pretend you're in the 2v2 bot lane, and you're kind of getting dunked on a little bit, and maybe you die once or twice, and they take a couple turret plates, and you're just like raging in your chat right now. Fuck you guys! Like, come gank jungler, and then all of a sudden, come the mid game, you group up, and it's like the third Drake, and your mid laner has 50 more CS than the other opponent, is 2,000 gold up, took 5 plates by split pushing in the top lane or whatever, or like took a tier 2 inner from pushing, got all the gold concentrated on them, and then this mid laner just monsters this entire team fight with this massive advantage, and then you're just like, oh shit, well, I guess it was going fine somewhere else. Like,
yes.
This is the mentality that people have. So they just, I guess, refuse to see that things are going elsewhere, and they're like, I mean, this is the biggest filter for me, is that people talk about Chovy and saying like, oh, he's just split pushing again, not paying attention to the map. I'm like, you realize that the whole team is on board with this strategy, and that he is accomplishing a fuck ton right now. And there's a reason why Gen.G, in spite of having fewer kills, has a 2,000 or 3,000 gold lead in this game against T1. And you realize that they are trading the first couple of Drakes to take Herald, to take towers, to take plates, so that they can come into a third Drake fight with a substantial gold advantage and, vision control.
Froggen told me this years and years ago. I'm talking literally something like 8 or 9 years ago. And he was so right and prescient. It's insane, Monty. He said basically normal people don't understand the concept of gold in the game, because what they don't know is when I play what they think is a boring lane, but I'm up 25 CS, that's like 2 kills or a kill and a half of gold. But I didn't ever have to take the risk of going and having a fight and potentially dying with that much health, or the jungler happens to come in and clean up the kill. I don't do that. I essentially got the value of the kills for free. I just got it by CSing and pushing them out of lane and having the jungler path at the right time. So essentially, think again of the solo queue example, guys. When you play solo queue, you're playing versus bad players at your level. So even a player who's fed might not do anything with it. Imagine how good pro players are. Now imagine the boring Azir player, Monty. He's only up 50 CS, but he doesn't have any kills, Monty. He hasn't done anything in the game. 50 CS is going to be like an item. Guys, a Z player in the mid game is going to be up a whole item. You can see how that just transfers into wins. Like if you have the team that can control the map, you win. It's why I'll say this a million times till people get it. The most underrated player in the LEC, and he always will be, is Larson from Koi. If you knew how many coaches, Monty, tell me he would be like the dream mid laner. He's a mid laner that always plays the champions he's really good on and is up in CS every game. What do you want? Like, bro, that's the start. That's like step one of how do I build a consistently winning league. My mid laner is always up in CS without taking massive fucking risks and just plays a mage, which will be very strong, doing loads of DPS later. That's the dream, is to have the Azir like that. But the problem is the fan only understands like the fucking pop-off mid laner, the guy who plays the crazy Zoe and does all the crazy bubble through the minion. They get that. They can see flash, but they can never get like, essentially there's a boring way to win in League of Legends, guys. And if you can do that, you will also be very successful, and it's consistent as well. That's what I like about Gen.G. Dude, the best thing about these two teams, to bring it back, is the contrast. Gen.G has a really consistent style and they know how they want to play. The joke with KT is KT don't even know how they want to play sometimes, but I'll tell you what, they're fucking exciting. KT is the team that'll just do anything and just go crazy and try and match you with a team fight they have no business being in, do a crazy base race. Like, what I love is the styles couldn't be any more contrasting.
Yeah, and yes, they are very, very exciting to watch in terms of the difference stylistically. But yeah, I think when you look at Gen.G, you just have to accept that they're playing. And to your point, Thorin, about taking gold other places on the map, here's a crucial factor. Riot has been very slowly, over time, buffing Gen.G's playstyle. Remember when they started increasing like tier 2 turret gold to encourage more split pushing?
Yep.
At the end of last year, they added, what, 200 local gold to the Rift Herald, which is almost a kill right there, actually. So if you are prioritizing Herald, and then there's plate gold that you get as well from using the Herald, if you are not losing things, if you are timing it in a way where you give over the dragon, and yes, the drakes all have gold value associated with those statistics, but they're random and they're going to affect team comps differently. And even then, Riot has nerfed the Drake stats again because the Drake stacking was considered too strong. So we're getting into a point where the Drakes are less powerful. Well, if you can take, if you get the first Rift Herald and you get a couple of plates and you're not dying for it because you're timing it around a Drake pickup from the enemy team, even if it's not exactly at the same time, there are windows of time where the other team has to recall after taking Drake, and then you have an opportunity to go get it. And especially if you're dominating mid lane, because remember, part of this series was Chovy blind picking LeBlanc against T1. And this is not something that we see that's very common. But as I've discussed many times, the key to Chovy's LeBlanc is that he plays it very, very differently depending on the matchup that he's in. He will use one of 3 different Keystone runes. He'll use Electrocute or First Strike or Airy, depending on the matchup. And then he'll change between Q max and W max in lane because he knows how to play this champion in all these different matchups to get push and to get advantage. And that is huge. That's huge. So if you have that, you have priority in mid lane basically constantly when he's playing this champion, and he's so fucking good at it. He played it incredibly well versus T1. Had insane backline access. One of the few times I liked seeing an Everfrost LeBlanc because he was using it to lock down carries in the backline to set them up for Jace poke. I mean, he is very, very good. And he creates this insane pressure on the map. He knows how to team fight well. And it is just a lie a lot of the time. Now, I will say, at Worlds this past year, he reverted to old Chovy form, where it was true that he wasn't leaving lane. It was true that he was struggling in order to play the map. But that wasn't true for the majority of for the entire domestic season last year, and it's not true now. If his team is doing something on the other side of the map that gets them killed, it is often their fault. They know that Chovy's not coming. The way they play is to use the split push and to create pressure for Chovy. So let's blame Peanut instead. Let's blame Pays for getting caught out. Let's blame Doran. I mean, Doran had a very bad series against T1. Very bad. But it's not Chovy. And I wish these fucking memes would die because Chovy is very aware now of what's going on the map, and he's playing the map extremely well.
Indeed. You know, a point that you made, I saw this as a clip, I think maybe. A point you made about T1 that I thought was very shrewd was because this is another area where you'll miss it if you watch what the camera's watching, is it does seem like in specific matchups, T1's whole plan is get everyone bot just so then Zeus has a permanent 1v1. And since he's the best 1v1 player, he just wins. The reason that's genius is because one, everyone's going to be looking at all the bot lane chaos and fighting and roaming. So they're not actually going to see what the dynamic is. But even more so, I just think of how many great teams had a great top laner, but it's counterintuitive, Monty. Normally the logic would be if you had the carry top laner, play everything towards him, dive his lane. But actually, as you're saying, it's a very clever way to actually cause an isolation play. That's actually quite an interesting sort of like, it's like there's like a second layer understanding of the meta there that T1's on that the other teams aren't.
Yeah, and I also think that it did bite T1 in the series they played against KT, because they were blind picking the Gnar, and like it gives Keen as a player some really advantageous matchups, and because Keen is so good, it caused issues. But when we saw this series between Gen.G and T1, where for both teams the Jace was the priority, and actually both mid laners and both top laners ended up playing Jace throughout the series, they were prioritizing Zeus's matchups just a little bit more. And also Thorin is he's a weaker player than Keen is, so it was more appropriate in that circumstance. But the strategy for Gen.G was also kind of hampered because in their last series, they were able to really abuse the Cassandre pick, which is uniquely powerful on Gen.G because it's a flex pick for them, and Chovy will play in the mid lane, and Chovy is very good at it. And they've been able to set up some really strong frontline compositions that enable Pays to just hard carry on like hyper carries in the back line. And then T1 also just banned out the Zeri for the entire series, which is something they're just going to have to keep doing until Zeri is nerfed, because T1 is just not a Zeri team. They did play it in against KT, but they kind of they lost the game that they played, but it wasn't because of the Zeri. They actually did quite well with it early, but it just doesn't fit their team identity super well. And Gumayusi is not, compared to all of the other players that were left in the LCK playoffs, Pays, Viper, aiming, he's just the worst Zeri amongst all of them. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to focus on that champion.
That's weird because he is an all-pro LCK player. Fuck that shit. Fuck that noise, guys. Where all the T1 players are all pro, are they? Like, so dumb. Don't worry, I've got a similar one I'm going to bitch about in LCS later, but I hate that angle. I hate that angle so much.
So I think that what we're running into is just a difference in cultures, Thorin, honestly, because the thing about the Korean culture is it's very collectivistic. So what they prioritize is teamwork, right? They prioritize kind of this selfless dedication to the whole and playing your role within the larger team. And because T1 has such phenomenal teamwork, they are naturally going to prioritize like voting for the players that they feel are contributing the most to the cohesive whole, which makes sense. But there isn't, I'm sorry to say this, guys, there is not a universe, crazy T1 fans, where replacing Gumayusi with Viper is a downgrade. I'm sorry, that's just not true. But they just don't prioritize the individual performance. And they, for whatever reason, it feels like they assume that a stronger individual player would not be able to change their style or mesh, or the other players on the team would be able to shift their style to accommodate those players, which I think is just false. Like, I think it's just
Here's
false.
The thing, it's like you say, if I think about like the philosophy, especially like the Confucian philosophy that underlies their society, it makes sense because if you've ever seen in interviews, fans, this is one area, by the way, that the players aren't lying in. When pro players, Koreans, famously say that line of like, I apologize to my fans because I lost the final, but if you cheer for me, I'll show better games next time. They're not actually bullshitting you. Like, as mad as it sounds, even if you, like, Chovy's a great example because he's barely ever won. Even if on paper you're the best mid laner or even the best Korean player, you yourself are supposed to think if you lose, even if it's not your fault. Like, remember, Hanwha Life and DRX Chovy, half the time he was carrying a bunch of like nobodies and a bunch of bomb like rookies or corpses like Morgan or whatever. But the point is, he himself is supposed to still think, I also lost to T1 in this match. I also should do better, could do better, must do better to win next time. So I agree. There is a logic they would have because it's sort of like their reward structure, which is everyone on the number one team that wins all the games players must be doing a great job, therefore they're all the best. That actually sort of, in a way, the point is it's just different from the way my lens for players, because obviously I would say one of the main areas of interest for me in team sports is when you have players that are better than the team, or they're better than people in a corresponding team whose team happens to perform better than them. Like, I think that's interesting because, for example, it's why if you were a fan who only looks at the headlines, dude, you would never have expected that KT T1 series, because you'd be like, wait a minute, T1's got all the best players and they're the best team. Well, this KT team has no chance. But what you wouldn't know in that scenario is KT had like 3 players who were like in contention for the best spot and are doing really well. As you say, Keane, if anything, because he doesn't get the chance, what a mad underrated top laner by the end of the split. Eamon's been carrying games all split. And as you said, if anything, I feel like BDD's just still living through the inertia of old Gen.G BDD. People just won't acknowledge he's the player that he is this year, mate. They act like he's washed. Like, mate, he's had a very good split. I mean, I think you even made the point, right? Like, if you were... I noticed that's already where, these fan discussions are already cursed, mate. When you had that discussion of like, if you had to replace someone, you'd probably take Faker. And then every comment was like, so you're saying they should replace Faker, you fucking moron. Like that's not even what he ever said, is it? Like, by the way, when you listen, you're actually supposed to listen to all the words they say, not just wait for one word to jump out and then go, ding, 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 dinner time. I'm all fucking salivated. No, where's my dinner? Where's my dinner? You rang the bell. You said Faker, T1, 3 world championships, rookie, like just fucking random free association or something.
I mean, it's very hard to have thought exercises, Thorin, when a lot of fans are actually incapable of thinking. They just respond rapidly to whatever, bait
the joke, Monty, is the problem is they're against both parts, thought and exercise. So shout a lot when League of Legends fans, aren't we? I know. Essentially, Monty, unless we can encode your wisdom into some sort of an E number that goes into some candy or crisps that they eat, there's no way to get the shit into their system, is there? That's the only way we could do it. Like, essentially, this show has been like a 10-year version of the movie Inception, where we're trying to incept into people's idea the concept of macro, just the concept. Like, once we have the concept in, we can do something with it. We've got to get the concept in there first, because at the moment, Monty, the joke is they still think it's just the team fight. It's one of the reasons why, I won't lie, has anyone ever noticed this? Let's see if fans notice this. Has anyone ever noticed Thorin always seems to have a way lower opinion of the LCS commentators than all the LCS fans? They always think they're not only the best, Monty, they think they're the best in esports. Here's why I look down on the LCS commentators. Bro, they still do the StarCraft 2 shit where they know a team is massively behind in items, gold, power levels, comp, scaling, but they still commentate it like it's 50-50 and whoever does better with the next punch wins the fight. They still do that shit, which I hated from StarCraft 2, because in StarCraft 2, if you know how the armies work, you know that one team has one guy has no supply left and his bases are all wrecked and they're just coming in to kill his workers. Like, he's not going to hold. And in fact, beyond the most casual guy, it actually feels like you're insulting me and my intelligence when you pretend that it's an equal footing. Like, LCS still talks, guys. Like, the team fight at the end of the game, which just closes the game, is like the middle of the game and it's a 50-50. And it's like, if this Zeri can just pop up, the Zeri 3 items behind it. You know what I mean? Like, it can't happen, you idiot. So that's why in general, like, guys, LCS just is arcade League of Legends.
I would just talk about Star Wars and Jurassic Park.
You have to, because it gets boring eventually when you know where it's heading, innit? Yeah.
But time to be interesting, because this game is not. But to be fair to the
and I'll also
casters,
complete the joke, to be fair, since I was talking about LCS casters. I thought my joke on Twitter, look, it was mildly harsh, Monty, but it was funny, which is my brand, right? So as I said, if you don't know, guys, because of all the things that have happened and all the reflections she's going through in her life, Latigris has decided to change her brand. She doesn't want to be called Latigris anymore. She wants to be called Gabby Durden, which is her name now, apparently. I think she got married recently or something. Now, I said, just to honor her wish, Monty, that's all I'm trying to do, just be compassionate. I said, guys, I don't want to see you say anymore, Latigris sucks at casting. It's Gabby Durden sucks at casting. It's what she would have wanted, Monty.
Jesus Christ.
Tis but a joke, and sort of true, but also a joke. So I'll sit in that part.
I mean, I still that experiment, I think, has absolutely failed.
And also, again, guys, I've waited a whole week. It still hasn't stopped yet. If I see the name Luger and the banana, no. The joke is she's inadvertently being better ambassador for CLG brand than anyone in about the last 5 years. She's already made me care about Luger. There you go.
I was watching the Golden Guardians versus EG match, and she started doing a Moo impersonations in the cast. I was just like, I can't do it, man. I can't.
Okay.
It's gone too far. It's gone too far. But the part where she did the Luger quote, I think one of the things is that she uses too much intonation where it sounds almost cartoonish. It honestly sounded that moment that she was trying to do a Red Eye impersonation.
All right, yeah. Oh, Luger, and the blood's running through his veins. He's in a fucking team fight. You're not going to believe this, lads. I'm Latigas, I mean Gabby Durden, and I'm here for brutal, savage, wrecked. Luger, get out of there, son. Oh, it's ridiculous. Now you say it, I actually can hear it now. You're right, because she did sort of go into that gravelly voice.
It's the growling. It's the growling.
Exactly.
You know, and here's what I think. I think her range is actually really good. If it didn't, the thing is that if she committed to like a few of the intonation changes that were consistent, it would become a style. But instead, she just sounds like a voice actor trying to do every voice on the entire planet. It sounds like a voice acting reel where you're like, here's my range of character.
Oh, it's like 100 voices in 60 seconds or whatever, right?
Like,
yeah,
exactly. This isn't a style. You're just showing me what you can do. Like, I don't get it.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah. So anyway, back to LCK. I am extremely excited for the KT Gen.G series.
Oh, the next matches are the best ones, guys. Like, first of all, this is just going to be a banger, and then whoever is in the final, you can make all the narratives you want for that. It's going to be sick in it. Like, these are going to be awesome matches, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I am sad that one of these two teams is going to be exiting. Like, it would be nice to have all three of these teams at MSI. KT is definitely like the more exciting team, but they are also the least disciplined of the teams that are still there.
That's why I'm worried, Monty. Like I said this before. Part of me to just be a troublemaker wants to see KT there. I mean, for a start off, KT against any LPL team would be amazing. What a fucking awesome series that would be. But I'm with you. Like, the problem is there's also the world where they're the one that fuck up and sort of do the Najin White Shield and just lose to the foreigners, etc. Right? I mean, see that too.
It just feels like when they play T1, KT plays scared and they play differently. I mean, the last time we saw them, they tried to like play the Lucian Nami and take it away from T1, and they got completely like booty blasted in that series. Then they developed the pick style. Then we got to see, you know, they beat Gen.G. By the way, you know, KT has been beating Gen.G this season. They've been, if anything, like the kryptonite to Gen.G.
That's why I want to see this matchup. Exactly.
You know, in the third game of their last meeting, that's when the BDD Twisted Fate first appeared, and they like hard countered the Akali and they won that series. Before that, I mean, it was a really close series. That third game, you know, ended up not being particularly close. So I do wonder sometimes about Gen.G's drafting, but in the latest series against T1, like that game 5, KT doesn't really play poke comps. They were forced to play a poke comp. They misplayed the poke comp. They allowed themselves to get flanked. They lost their minds when T1 started doing Baron and like hard committed with a poke composition without checking their flanks first. Faker gets the flank. Faker kills Keen. And then it's like really problematic to them. The thing that is the advantage for KT is that they have, it feels like they almost have too much range at certain points in time, right? And so they don't actually, they play all these different champions and they have these huge pools, but they don't always understand the best ways to put them together, which I think is what gets them into trouble, or they don't understand how to play with them as a team. Now they can get there, like once they master a composition, like once we saw them master like the Vi Twisted Fate pick compositions, they are really excellent at it, right? But when we see them try new things, a lot of times they fall flat or they think they have more range as a team than they do. The advantage for KT is that because of their wealth of picks, they are probably the most dangerous red side team left in the bracket. Look at their match against Hanwha Life. Blue side is very good right now. You have to have some really, you know, sneaky picks in order for red side to work. But we saw Keen play the top lane Rise in the match against Hanwha Life. You know, we saw these advantages really take hold because they could just counterpick on R5, and it worked really, really well for them. And Keen is just in amazing form at the moment. He is doing great. Like,
he's mega.
It's really hard to play against Keen because you feel like a lot of the time you have to ban the Jax. If you don't ban the Jax, and the Jax didn't even come out, wasn't perma-banned in the series, was banned one game, I believe. And he was just playing counter matchups. He's going to play the Gwen and the Cassante. You know, what happens if Gen.G in this upcoming series, if the Cassante is left open? T1 didn't do that, but Keen can just play mid lane. Keen can just play mid lane Gwen if he has to. Like, I'm sure they'll make that swap off if they need to. BDD has shown an enormous champion pool this season. Yeah, we think about the Twisted Fate. We think about the Talia. We think about the Azir before the Azir changes came into play, the Veigar now. But guess what? He's had some really fucking good Yone games as well. So his champion pool is huge. He looks really on form. KT is able to give up the Zeri, which arguably was a mistake because Viper was nearly able to carry several games in this series, but they're willing to play the Draven into it, which has been a good champion for aiming this split. He's had some really dominant Draven games. Lehens has been really on form. I mean, this is a very good KT team, and they played entirely differently this week against Hanwha than they did last week against T1. We didn't see the TF, for example. So I really like where KT's going. I think they are going to beat Gen.G, but I think it's going to be a really close series.
I also did think it was hilarious when they gave the Zeri up in that game, because it's like, bro, there's one player on the other team can beat you by himself, and you've given him the champion that enables him to do that, you fucking idiot. Like if that champion just peels for itself, does it? Can just fly around like, oh, it's so dumb that I know. Why tempt fate? Fate?
Viper Zaya is also just fucking amazing. Like, I don't know how you can watch Hanwha live and just not feel bad for Viper, because Zeka was just fucking terrible in this series. Yeah. He was so bad. Yeah. Just like inexcusably bad. I mean, even in the last game, like last year, guys, when we saw the Ahri meta really be dominant in spring, what happened, especially in the LPL, and then also a little bit in the LCK, was that the Veigar started coming out as an answer to some of these picks. And because you can basically just put Ahri in the box and then Ahri can't ult or ults into a wall. Like it is very effective against Ahri. You have a really safe laning phase, honestly. So you can get up to the point where you could just one-shot the Ahri with targeted abilities. Like, fuck it, man. Like if she's just dashing around like an idiot, you just press R and click on her and she just vaporizes. The other thing is, like, I don't really understand what Hanwha Life was thinking with these fucking Zilean picks. BDD plays Veigar. Like, let me tell you.
Also, he used to play Zilean as well, dude. He used to be a Zilean player too.
That's true.
Remember, because Bjergsen did that to him as well. I was like, bro, you're playing it into a Zilean player. He isn't like LCS unaware what the champion does. He knows.
The funny thing is, we saw this exact mid lane matchup, Bjergsen with Zilean into Vicla's Veigar in LCS. Yeah. So this was Life playing Zilean support, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the problem with playing Zilean into Veigar at all, no matter if they're in a lane matchup or not, is that so the Chrono Shift comes out, you just target somebody else with the Veigar. Okay, the Veigar doesn't use R. The Chrono Shift is used. You kill that person, they revive, and then you just kill them immediately with Veigar ultimate anyway. And especially as a support Zilean, that's not going to be giving the same amount of HP to the target that's reviving. It basically is just you kill that person, they revive, Veigar R, they're dead. The other problem is, even if you don't have Veigar R, when they're dead, you just put a fucking cage on their corpse. They revive directly into a stun and they're dead. So there's really not a lot of good options, right? Like you can time Veigar, the dark matter as well, right? So it really is just a very bad pick into Veigar. And when the BDD is the Veigar player in the LCK. So if you want to play it, fine, just fucking ban the Veigar. Like, goddamn.
By the way, just as an aside, because obviously, like with Gen.G, for example, we always talk about score. If people don't know, I've got a piece of interesting info. So if you don't know, the KT Rolster coach is Rapid Star, the old mid laner of Frost back in the day, etc. Here's some deep lore people aren't going to know, Monty, because I have the sort of brain that stores information like this. So back in the day, people might remember one of the first teams that Rapid Star got a coaching gig on was with old mate fucking Reaper on EDG, if you remember. He was working with EDG. And so back in the day, this is hilarious. You can go look this up on Twitter. Go look up Rapid Star's name. It's like Min Seong Jong 1, right? So look, basically go to his Leaguepedia, you'll get it from there. If you look up on his Twitter using an advanced search function, put in Kelsey, right? Put in Karen Moser. It'll be Aaron Moser, right? Because here's what's hilarious. This is one of the funniest, like, inadvertent interactions I've ever seen, Monty. Kelsey was doing what they all did back in the day in 2016, which is you watch the game and you sort of shitpost on Twitter while the game's live, don't you? So all she actually did was a totally harmless tweet, Monty, that just said, like, Mako, stop carrying Rapid Star. Rapid Star himself came on Twitter and, first of all, like a boomer, tweeted like 10 times individually, not as a thread, at Kelsey directly. And some of them were fucking hilarious because it was a culture clash and he's coming from Korea. He was even tweeting stuff like, I'm happy to take constructive criticism, but I don't appreciate mere random pick jokes, which I believe is offensive. And like the whole way this interaction took, it was the most harmless throwaway, like light flame of all time. And he was like, for real, just like breaking it all down. And he even at one point was so triggered, guys. I'm not joking. You look all this up, it's all on Twitter. He even at one point said like that mad line when he triggered, it just goes something like essentially like, if you disagree, I think you should do the draft, sweetie. You're like, what are you talking about? Bro, it's a tweet. It's a fucking throwaway. So I just find it hilarious. He's back. He's just fucking back again. He's back. If you look at his Twitter, by the way, he hasn't used it for that long. He still has all Cloud9 branded on from when he was in their team like 2 years ago now. What a fucking weird guy. What a strange guy.
I mean, I'm very good friends with Rapid Star's partner, and she's fluent in English, so she probably like helped him translate some of that. Okay. She used to work at OGN. She is fucking awesome. So Rapid Star finished his military service and is back in the thick of things, but he's a good coach from all accounts. I mean, a lot of people have spoken highly of him and his coaching abilities, and I think KT's doing very well right now. So he and Supreme, who are the strategic coaches, must be doing something right. But yeah, he probably will see a lot of the English quotes that are said about him because of his relationship. That's funny. That's probably where that
I just thought it was funny because I'm sure even Kelsey was like, what the fuck? Why is because this is 2016, guys, not like now when everyone's on Twitter. Like back then, like why the hell would a Korean be tweeting at me? Like when I've told that story about how I flamed Korma, it's not like he came on Twitter right after and say, all right, bitch, 1v1 me at the Baron, like, you know, and then he got back to me through a back channel. He didn't like it. He didn't just flame me directly, did he? Like, Thorin, I find this offensive, your joke about me removing Faker from MSI. Like, and spoil it wasn't a joke. You ruined esports history. And also, I'll just say this, Korma. Once you let EDG, the LPL, win that one international tournament, what happened since? Yeah, exactly, motherfucker. They've had MSI on lock for a start off. And then secondly, it was the beginning of all the end, wasn't it? Years later, you just gave up the whole kingdom. The whole kingdom.
So, yeah, I think as we look at T1 as well, and we do have to talk about T1 a little bit here because fans were saying that this series, it seemed like the opinion was that the series wasn't very close versus Gen.G. Like Gen.G probably should have won game 2 of this series. And it felt like this should be a 5-game series. Faker had an amazing engage on Lysandra, but as I said on Power Spike, I think the key to remember about T1 is where their strengths are. It's not necessarily in making the best macro plays, right? They are a skirmishing team. They like to outplay you in the skirmish. They like to outplay you in the team fight, and they are insanely good at doing that. Insanely good. I think the reason why Gen.G wants to operate this strategy where they're cross-mapping for gold is because they know they need advantages in order to fight T1. And yeah, they fucked up. But the thing about T1 that we have to remember, what makes them so great right now is that they understand the win conditions of these team fights so perfectly. That's why they were able to beat KT despite a huge deficit in that final game, because they knew they had to like force them into fights and get a flank and like basically forced the KT to overcommit and overreact to a Baron situation, which allowed them to get a foothold back into the game. When we look at the Gen.G series, they are really good at tracking cooldowns, like ult cooldowns, summoners cooldowns. They will skirmish you, get you to blow those abilities before a Drake fight, then fight you at Drake and play perfectly around the abilities that are down. The reason why Faker was able to get that Lysandra engage wasn't because it was a fucking surprise. It's because KT made a positional error in clustering, but also they saw the opportunity. Faker made the play, clawed in, and then flash W'd onto them and then ulted to zone them out of the fight so that the Malphite ult then did nothing because there was no follow-up damage onto Gumayusi's Aphelios. But also it was possible because Pays didn't have the Xayah ult. Like if the Xayah ult is there and he's able to use that instead of going into an hourglass or a stopwatch, I should say, a stopwatch stasis, for 2 seconds where he's not able to do damage and he's not able to actively move around, that team fight probably goes very differently. But this was a game that was played on very small margins, and T1 won because they are a very good team at what they do. But let's just say, for example, some of these Drake fights go differently and Gen.G wins them with the gold advantage they had accrued going in. What happened is that both teams basically decided to all in on very specific timings. And they agreed. They handshook third dragon, fourth dragon. Here's the handshake. We are going to fight here. And Gen.G said, we are going to fight here with a gold lead. And T1 said, we are going to fight here with an ultimate and summoner spell lead. And T1 won. But if those go slightly differently, this is a very, very different series. And Gen.G played a very good series. Chovy played a very good series.
It's like you say, they at least gave themselves a conceivable way to win. What I hate, and I've always said this, Monty, in LCK, is when teams just handshake that they're going to lose to a better team playing the same style. Like, there's no point just going directly into what T1 wants. If you can find some angle that you can maybe get any edge, you got to go for it. Even if it ends up, like you say, it didn't work this time, but at least they had a chance.
Yeah, and I don't know how you guys want Gen.G to play against T1. They have their own style. Their style is extremely effective. They're one of the best teams in the world. But like, do you just want them to fight every single dragon in the early game against T1? Like that, they'll just lose. Like they're definitely going to lose.
Here's the thing, Monty. This must be the nephews who are the equivalent of the idiots in the bar watching the UFC fight, where they're like, "Thing about me is, I just won't go down. I've got too much heart. I'm Irish. Like I'd probably like take it, and then as I'm about to go out, I'd go like, not on my watch, and I'd be back up again. That's what they want in league. They're like, I tell you what, I'm just built different, money. Team fights around a dragon. I don't care if I'm down, if I'm up. Tell you what, I'm fucking you up. I'm peeling on your back. Give me a break. Like,
there's so people who are like, Floyd Mayweather is the fucking worst. Like he doesn't actually go on the attack. It's like you have to realize that teams are playing into their style. What you're really saying is you hate Gen.G style. That's what you're saying.
They just think it's boring, let's be real. Like they do every macro team, they think it's boring.
and the thing is that there are very exciting players on Gen.G. It's not like they don't have stars. Chovy is one of the best players in the world. Pays has been an amazing
He's been a revelation
player.
Yeah.
Like he and Leave, like we're going to see when the dust settles after these playoffs, but he and Leave are definitely like the top rookies in the world as of 2023. Now, we haven't seen Leave's playoff performance. Again, the nerves could come in. The nerves haven't come in for Pays, guys. Like he did a great job. He did a great job in this series. So I really think Gen.G played well. I don't think that this result is indicative of what a future series could be. I think this should have been a 5-map series. I think Gen.G really should have won game number 2 of this series if it wasn't for T1's incredible team fighting, which is the factor you have taken to play. That's what brought them back in game 5 versus KT, was really good awareness of how to play against KT's team composition, which abilities were up, and their ability to force teams to fight them. That is the T1 edge, right? This is why T1 is probably the best team in the world right now, because they can play from behind, because they are so smart about how they take fights.
Thing is, though, I'm with you. I guess the problem is this. Gen.G is the second best team in LCK, but I agree. The problem is the main kryptonite is KT, and that's the team that might now eliminate them in third place. So if Gen.G don't get to go to MSI, I actually feel a bit sorry for them. I know what you mean. Like they are actually the second best team. It's just unfortunately the nightmare is that your Thorin in your side is the third or fourth best team. You're gonna have to run into them eventually, aren't you?
And the thing about KT too is that KT has just gotten remarkably better over the second round robin, and they continue to improve. And I think what's scary about KT is they're going to take that 5th game against T1 and they're going to learn from it. And they've shown that maybe they can beat T1. Like it really is a remarkable playoffs, I think, in LCK. Like this has been, thank God we have the double elimination now, guys. If we didn't have double elim, then we just probably wouldn't have been able to see this KT versus Gen.G match, which would have sucked.
I also just love that it actually like ties into my old theory about like hermeticism of the occult, that like what you name yourself is very important, because if you name yourself Rolster, as in like roller coaster guys, and then your org does this for 10 years, just saying, maybe learn, you know what? Like, because the joke is, as long as they've been called KT Rolster, they have been a roller coaster team to follow. Like, the highs are crazy, the lows are dead insane. You're just whipping between the two constantly. You're doing loop the loop, so it's ridiculous, isn't it? It actually is.
I just like how we're just so far removed from the original meaning of the Rolster now, because they're still called KT Rolster, but they removed the roller coaster from their logo. So
Yeah, they
we
took
just
off the little the wheels or
the
whatever
track,
it was, didn't they?
yeah,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
like
Yeah,
loop track. So now they're
yeah,
just called Rolster with no reference to the actual roller coaster. Every day we stray further from God's light
yes,
in terms of
exactly.
branding, guys. Everything is an acronym
Yes.
that doesn't actually mean anything anymore,
Oh,
and
it's when they
including
do that shit like TSM where they go, oh, sorry, it's not actually Team Solomon anymore. It's just TSM. Like, well, what does it stand for? It's just TSM. So
it's just
corporate
TSM,
TSM
and
Limited. I know.
we have the worst logo of all fucking time. Like it's just
So whacking
fucking
it.
ugly. Yeah, it's but yeah, Rolster. By the way, this is very common in. It doesn't make sense in English. They're applying Korean language to English. So in Korean, it's very common in a phrase to take the first syllable of the first word and the last syllable of the second word and jam them together to create a single two-syllable shortened word that combines both for ease of use. But when you apply it to English, you end up with Rolster, which is just hilarious. Yeah. So it requires very specific knowledge of Korean and English language to even understand what the fuck is going on with KT. And we could have just had Finger Boom instead, which
It's very fitting, though.
might have
Like I
been
said,
better.
definitely it works for the narrative of the team. I'll give you that. Right. What about this then? If we pivot to LCS, I have a very specific topic I want to start with here because I noticed a couple of other people, like I saw Amazing made a similar point. I can't believe everyone's not making this point. You know, that great discussion, we had it ourselves it might even be last week, Monty. You know, the discussion of who is your MVP of the LCS? Is it Prince or is it Berserker? The two obvious candidates, right? Who've basically had the big pop offs and their two teams are the best teams. Dude, it killed me inside when I saw that graphic where they were like, here are your 5 candidates for the MVP, and 3 of them are from Cloud9, right? Think this through, guys. If Berserker is the most valuable player, how can 2 players on his team simultaneously also potentially be the most valuable player? What are we doing at this point in time? Like, and also, I didn't do this. Like, I still think Berserker is a legitimate pick if you have a different reason than me. But if you actually look at the way that was structured, Prince wins automatically. He's the only fucking FlyQuest player, even in the Convo. And since his team's almost as good as that, doesn't he just win? Like, I think that the way that was just framed almost ruins the Convo. If it was just like there was 3 people, let's say that same graphic, Monty, was just Gory, Berserker, Prince. Now you can have a good Convo. Now you can set it up reasonably. Now we can do I think you actually spoil the Convo when you put the other 2 Cloud9 players in. Because the obvious question is this one. Even if it's that you guys thought, like, I'll give you the example. The obvious example is Blabber, right? Blabber is also incredibly influential. In fact, I might even argue Blabber is more influential on whether Berserker can carry a game than whether Berserker is a better ADC. Prince doesn't have Blabber. He has Speaker, mate. They'll notice Speaker didn't make the list. So what I would say is this. What is Fudge doing there? Why is Fudge a 3rd player from Cloud9 on there? Has anyone, by the way, is there a single human, including Fudge, who thinks he's the most valuable player of Cloud9? What is going on? Like, guys, you've just lost the plot. And the joke here, Monty, is they ain't Korean. They've got no excuse for having all these fuckers in there. We're supposed to believe you can be, like, mate, my boy Aaron Rodgers was the MVP of the league twice in a row because people understand his team sucks and doesn't have all the best wide receivers and don't have some, like, all-pro fucking, you know, like, they don't have, everyone gets that. Like, I don't know what people are even trying to do with this MVP vote.
I mean, God only knows. It continues to be embarrassing.
Those awards are just going to be a joke forever, aren't they? They're never going to take it seriously.
We already knew what the answer was going to be after Berserker was voted first on the All Pro team. Like, it's definitely going to be Berserker.
It's going to be him. It is.
Yeah. Unless there's like a crazy left field Blabber pick, but that would be very weird.
Especially because we also know historically there's always recency bias in how people vote in these fucking polls. Like, they don't. Here's the problem. Prince did it exactly the wrong way if you want to be the MVP. You don't carry the first 3 or 4 weeks. You got to carry the last 3 or 4 weeks. And the reason I don't like it is I actually think on some level Riot's sort of right. If you ever look at Cloud9, Cloud9 isn't a one-man team. Like I just said before, isn't everyone agreeing that Blabber's some like generational jungle talent who completely affects the game? Right? Spoiler. If you're ADC, the number one thing you want is a super gank heavy fucking jungler who goes crazy on the map. Like, not only does he get you ganks, he fucks up the other jungler. That's your dream scenario. Like, I just think the way people set it up, it's so silly. Like, I don't know what they're discussing at this point in time. Aren't they just now discussing, like, which player do you like best on Cloud9? Like, we're not even discussing who the MVP is anymore. What?
I think the list of the top 5 was just silly. I think you can do top 3 with 3 different players from different teams, like you said, and it's totally fine. And I think we already know it's going to be Berserker because they released All Pro first. So bit of a bummer. But what can you do? I mean, I think Cloud9 is also just unquestionably the best team, having seen these last couple of weeks. I mean, EG just had such a tragic, fucking embarrassing performance against Golden Guardians.
Yep.
Credit to Golden Guardians. You can't you can't just dismantle EG that easily without playing well yourself. We've seen Licorice like do much better in the playoffs than he had done previously. Gory and River completely dominated.
But it's weird. Licorice definitely did like that scene in the movie where he wasn't just washed, Monty. He was dead. He was buried. There was a grave that said Licorice. We placed a flower on it, but as we turned away, you know what? He did do that. Yeah, he did. He came up exactly. The arm came up, and there's still life there. There's still some life. Might be a zombie. I don't know yet, but he's still some life there at the moment. It's true.
Well, I mean, he's playing a lot of carry champions too, and he's doing well. He had a very good performance, like legit, a very good performance against EG. But part of this was also just EG completely griefing. Like I don't know if I've seen them play this badly other points in time. I was laughing.
They were whack. Like some of the re-engages and some of the times they got caught. Oh, it was a disgrace.
Dude, I was laughing with Dom because Closer cast the second game of this series, and you could tell he was just so deeply confused by what the fuck EG was doing. Like they would literally see River killing Scuttle Crab, and then Vulcan would like walk into Tribrush and just die to a Maokai that he knew was there and a Rel that he knew was coming. And I was like, what is even happening? And then River just walks into mid lane and kills Jojopian immediately afterwards. It was bizarre. In the final game of this series, when Licorice was playing Rumble, Jojopian was split pushing in bot. It was 26 minutes into the game. Licorice is split pushing bot. He's very fed. Jojo comes up on Lissandra. Licorice chunks him out. Sunday TP's bot. When Baron is up, when Licorice has TP, they don't even, Licorice literally just walks away, TPs to Baron, and then they have a 1 HP Lissandra and a Malphite bottom with no TP, and they lose Baron. Like, I don't even know how it's possible to play this badly at a professional level. Like, Jojo was terrible.
Oh, mate, one of the first things I was thinking of, again, remember, I'm always looking at a bigger picture, Monty. I'm never like a prisoner of the moment in general. Obviously, I am like a motherfucker for Vitality in the LEC, but we all have our biases. So, in general, I try to look at the bigger picture. You know what I've been thinking this whole fucking year? Mate, what a difference Peter Dunn makes to a team. Remember, in theory, this is like an upgraded version of Peter Dunn's EG. But where is the coherence of how they play, how they draft, how they work around Jojo, etc.? Mate, Jojo looks night and day when he used to be on Peter Dunn's team. He actually was one of the best mid laners when he played under him. Like, he sort of had all his weaknesses covered. He just looked good in LCS. He's had some mad sus games this split.
I mean, he built Everfrost Hourglass on Ahri as he finished the game with cooldown boots, Everfrost. Like, what the fuck is he going to do? Like, why even play Ahri? Why even play it? Like, why? I have to say, like, Jojopian may still be recovering from whatever sickness he had.
Oh, he was ill a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to read too much into it, but
so I'm with you on that specific pick, though, Monty. It's why I've always thought, like, it's horrible when Ahri comes into the meta in Asia, because inevitably some fucking LCS player plays it and does nothing the whole game. Because one of the worst things about Ahri, I'll give you an analogy, Monty. One of the things in MMA that actually semi-ruins the sport is when people who are amazing at wrestling get a knockout win, because what happens is they become addicted to becoming boxers. And what they'll do is just box all these fights that they could be winning by wrestling, right? That's what an Ahri's like. What happens is you play Ahri as a mid laner and you have that one game where you perfectly ult and get like a kill. You shouldn't be able to get under their tower and get out alive. And when that lights up those little dopamine pleasure, the reward circuit, mate, people are chasing that fucking dragon for years after that. The amount of shit Ahri games they'll throw in after that's mental. Because in their brain, they always think just like the guy, but if I catch him, it's over. It's over when I do it. And you never do. All you need to know is this. Any Ahri that just only uses the ult to get out, it's like, get off the fucking server. Get off the server, you arsehole. That's supposed to be OP as fuck if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, but it just hurts to see Jojopian like this, because he used to be so aggressive and like
he was killing it on Victor and stuff last year. Yeah.
Look, he was a playmaker, and like he just completely like morphed into Bjergsen this series. Like, I don't understand This is not the win
And he means
condition that you
modern
have.
Bjergsen, obviously. Not the good one that used to be the MVP of the league in that, yeah.
No, Lissandra build
There you
Everfrost,
go.
Zhonya's first
Yes.
Ari. Like it's just so confusing, this team. Like they played a horrific series in terms of macro. Horrific.
Dude, the way that he was playing, they should rename him Jojo Peon. There you go. Not bad.
Not bad. Not bad.
And also, technically, even does tie in some mad deep lore way into the fact that, like, League is daughter, which actually came from Warcraft 3, and the Peon obviously is the most weak unit. So just basic as shit, isn't it? So pretty based, actually, that analogy. Not bad.
Very good. Very good. I think also Golden Guardians came in very prepared. They were flexing the Cassante like we've seen from Gen.G. That was great. Licorice was really activated on some of these unconventional picks like the Rumble. They were taking away the Tristana after game 1, and then Huki was able to play engage supports, and he had some really nice engages. But again, EG put up basically no resistance. Like it seemed like they wanted.
One thing I want to ask you was this, right? The thing that most underwhelms me about EG's performances, mate, if I go right now and I look on Leaguepedia and I open the rosters, that roster still looks like it should be in the final. Dude, look at the players they have. Like, it's almost inconceivable how underwhelming the finished product was. Like, this should be a banger roster. Whoever GM'd it looked like they did an awesome job in the offseason. They did all the right moves like we've discussed. So, like, it's just ended up being less than some of its parts. So it's so sad.
Yeah, I think the illness, whatever happened, really hurt them. But we had this discussion on Power Spike, which is how much of a fraud is Evil Genius is for running this roster. They arguably upgraded, especially on Danny's current form towards the end of summer. With FBI, and like someday is maybe a slight downgrade to Impact, but he's still one of the best like weak side top laners. He didn't change their style fundamentally, and they just played an absolute garbage series. There's been a lot of drama around EG though. Probably got to them somewhat, the sickness, the lack of practice, but I think for
you're saying that they were down with the sickness then, Monty?
They were down with the sickness.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. There you go. It's all good. It's all good. I set you up.
I think what's depressing is that the end of this LCS season of what was supposed to be so competitive ended up with Golden Guardians in the top 3 and Cloud9 looking like they're just going to absolutely dumpster whoever reaches them in the final. Like FlyQuest never actually put their teamwork together and arguably have gotten worse individually.
I mean, the joke, obviously, this is how you're supposed to set it up, Monty, is you go, well, you know what? In the end, I guess that, Korean team did do well. Not Team Liquid, of course. Talk about Golden Guardians, give me a break. Like, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Because they do have all the imports. Fair play. Okay.
Credit to Golden Guardians, though. They were playing well, basically. Some of their players were playing well all split, and it was just Licorice who was terrible. And once they, Stixane was performing above level, Gory and River have been great. And as soon as Licorice, like, snapped into a somewhat of a form, now they actually look like they're pretty good.
I would say if people were watching last year's, I know people always thought that like analysts were overrating River on Dignitas because Dignitas isn't good, obviously. Now you see why. Like that guy always was showing promise to me, mate. Like, he's actually just a good player. And it's in the right team now, the team that works for him.
Yeah, I don't read too much into this EG series because they played so egregiously badly that mid ganks were effectively free for Gory and River. Not to say that Vikla hasn't been inting the laning phase.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he definitely has, which obviously could be a huge problem for FlyQuest in their matchup. But I find it difficult to believe that the same level of mistakes will be made by EG. Their play was just totally miserable.
The obvious question is this, like, I'm going to guess almost everyone thinks FlyQuest will find a way to beat Golden Guardians, go to the final.
Probably,
The problem is, they better have a total different fucking game plan for Cloud9 in the final, mate. Like that series was shit. Like that was supposed to be the series we were all waiting for as like the marquee matchup. Like let's see the MVPs go head to head. What a fucking underwhelming upper bracket match that was. FlyQuest, they only even got going like anywhere in the game 3. It's like the draft was shit, the fucking player was shit, everything was lackluster. This is also why I will say we nailed this, mate. Notice how from the beginning of the split, we stressed 2 things to people. One, Prince is actually way better than his name. If you don't know this guy, you're going to think he's not that good. He's going to be cracked. But we also did say, like, Vikler is good, but he definitely isn't some monster, mate. Like, he was someone himself who could be like up and down when he was on KT. Like, sadly, he is the player that's just degraded ever since he got to NA, hasn't he? He's like, it feels like he's every 2 weeks he gets worse, mate. He's kind of whack now, unfortunately.
He is, and he's playing over aggressively at times in the laning phase. But honestly, like Ayla's Rakan was the true tragedy.
He should be not even allowed in LCS, mate. I'm sick of this guy. I'm sick of this guy. If people want to know another example, you might all think if you're a Team Liquid fan, come on, bro. Forget dodging bullets, we're catching them all. Oh no, there was a world, go look it up. When last season, the off season, Steve had to say all the right things about how we downsize. They tried to imply they were going to replace Core JJ, like the franchise player of Team Liquid, with Elia. They were going to put him in instead. They were trying to flex that like Harry and fucking Ayla would be like the bot laners. Right. Like, that was fucking egregious as shit. This guy is the joke is he should actually almost have never come back once they put Winsome in. Like, once they started winning, they should have just stuck with that lineup. I mean, it's hindsight now. We all thought maybe it was an upgrade, but hindsight, look, it did check out 2020. You would, if you could go back now, you would just never play Ayla, would you?
Well, I think that there's probably very good reasons that they're playing Ayla over Winsome. Like, there could be scrim results. I don't think they're doing this on a lark. Like, they have. It's not like they don't have access to both players.
It just hasn't worked, mate. He's not the player they clearly think he is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the best solution to this issue is. Like, it seems that they're probably pretty unhappy with both of these supports. Maybe if they can engineer some sort of trade with Team Liquid for Core JJ, if Team Liquid's going to blow up their League of Legends team after underperformance, that might be an option for them. They would certainly, I think, be a lot better, even though Core JJ himself has not been performing well, but could be I think he could be rehabilitated on this roster. And there would be like at least a honeymoon phase where they could work it out. I think the trouble is they have a very poor support player, and that might also be causing Prince to degrade in form if he feels like he has to do even more carrying as a result. And then in the mid lane's case,
I mean, Vikla, even limits your draft. Like, you just can't draft certain bot lanes at the moment if your support's not good enough.
Yeah, I think Vikla, something's gotten into his head too. Like, why is he building Crown Victor in the first game of this series when he could just walk into a brush and get hit by a Maokai sapling and trigger Crown? Like, he could just get hit by Heimerdinger or whatever. Like a piercing arrow from Berserker on Varus. There's no good point to building Crown in this game because it's so easily popped in non-ideal circumstances, or it's just popped in the neutral when you're setting up and poking before a fight, and then by the time you join the fight, your Crown is not active. So it's a very bad build, I think, in this game. And Vikla himself, he used to so the demise of Vikla went like this: dominate, then kind of int in the laning phase, but like get back and split push and team fight well. Now he's not even doing that, so he's just inting in lane and then never doing anything. It's a bad position to be in.
Oh, it sucks, mate. Especially because, unfortunately, here's the other part. If FlyQuest beats GGS, then FlyQuest's also going to MSI, aren't they? So fucking... The problem now is like that was really tantalizing those first 4 or 5 weeks, Monty. It's not really that tantalizing anymore, is it? Like, I feel like Prince is just going to be fucking trapped. He's elo held, isn't he? If he goes international.
I mean, maybe. I think the support issue is the biggest issue here for FlyQuest. So I think they're going to have to make some sort of change.
Yeah, think how much they're going to get gapped. Like, dude, all the supports there are going to be God tier for LCK, etc. Come on, boys.
I mean, he's getting gapped by Sven, and Sven is not. Yeah. I mean, the support position is very weak overall in LCS.
That's
right
also
now.
why I was so. I thought it was so sad about EG. You're supposed to automatically have that on lock with Vulcan. You got one of the best already. Nah, the whole thing's just sad, mate.
Well, and even though Sven is doing pretty well, the level of competition is low, and I would say arguably Sven underperformed in a meta where 80 carries were supports, where we would have expected him to be completely dominant, and that hasn't been true.
So, and also, he underperformed because he wasn't even one of the MVP candidates. Give me a fucking break. I know it's mental, isn't it? That's
You
also the
fight-
funniest part about that is imagine being the two Cloud9 players who aren't on that list. Like, what's the inference that you're so shit? 3 of them might be the best player in the whole league, but you're just trying to like, what's the inference become? I know.
Here's how bad LCS is to support, Thorin. Sven is arguably the best support player in the LCS. It's like him or Vulcan, right?
Yep.
And neither of them is going to be an MVP candidate.
Rough, mate.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah.
It's rough.
I mean, even Keria was like throwing shade at Sven. I don't know if you saw that interview.
Yeah, I saw the headline, yeah.
Yeah, where he was saying like he just doesn't even think about Sven, but he likes Mickey X or whatever. Just true. I think Mickey X has had a great year. He's had a very good year. But the support pool is just the mid and support pools in NA are just really tragic right now. It's going to be rough. And if Vicla's feeding in games with these mid laners, pretty sure you guys don't want to see him versus some of the Asian mid laners that are going to be out there. LCS, I just think at the end of the day, this is going to be a Cloud9, hard stomp in the final. I really hope I'm
Looks
wrong.
like it.
I'd love FlyQuest to like give them a run for their money.
Here's the obvious thing.
Win.
Here's the thing I hope for, Monty. This just feels like Hanwha against Gen.G. It's like you can't really beat them. So at least can I get, just like I got a Viper pop-off, can I at least have one Prince pop-off game?
Yeah,
can I just have one draft where he gets the peel for the fucking champion that can carry and he just goes off? Give me one and he can win the series. I'm cool with that. It's okay. Because let's be real, it should be FlyQuest against fucking Cloud9 anyway for the title, and Cloud9 should win. So that's all good. It's all good if it goes like that.
I said this on Twitter as well, but something that's been really ignored about Cloud9 is that everybody was memeing on Cloud9 systems in spring when they were like, oh yeah, LS didn't fit with the Cloud9 systems and the way we want to operate the team. So they got rid of him. And everybody's like, oh, you're so stupid. You started so strong with LS and like this was his roster. Why didn't you just let him cook? And meanwhile, oh yeah, guys, what happened? Well, after they had a chance to retool the roster in the way that they wanted to for summer, because remember, they were kind of committed, they literally dropped the MVP of the split in Summit because he wasn't working with the team. How'd that go? Oh, right. They won summer improbably. And here they are again in another final back to back. And they are huge favorites this time. Not like last time, guys, where it was kind of a surprise. Now they are massive favorites in the final of the LCS. So how are the systems going now, guys? All you guys who were memeing on them, all you guys who were complaining, all you guys who were criticizing them, ever since they doubled down on their own techniques, on their own infrastructure, they've reached back-to-back finals. 1-1 will probably win another one. So seems like the faith in that was pretty justified from Cloud9.
Also, just because I've been keeping track of this, everyone now finally was, well, not really now, because unfortunately we know that Cloud9 probably wins, but everyone was hyped for the playoffs finally. These big teams, we had all this in theory parity from like 2 to 5. I know some people actually believed 100 Thieves were going to win. You're just a fucking mark. I mean, the joke there is I'm talking in 8 shot, but no, whoever might have thought they were going to win, they were never going to win, you fucking moron. I could have sat double if down with the truth serum and sodium pentothal, and he told me, yeah, probably just going to lose. So spring split doesn't matter. Like, oh shit, why that's that long? Like he was on a Lenovo broadcast. But what I'll say is this: if you think this split was lackluster, guys, you're not ready for the depression you're going to sink into when MSI happens and then the summer split begins, and you remember, oh shit, we're the only region that has that whack format. Back to the round robins again. No, not the round robin mines, not the PO1s. You must dig more mines and get off, please. Like, I remember there was an old cartoon, right? It was like a Jay and Silent Bob, but there was like an animated version, Monty. And they did this one where it was a spin-off of like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And they get like trapped into like a slavery essentially with like some like weird like Middle Eastern looking guys like whipping them and stuff. And the joke goes, the guy makes you like, because he's a literal slave driver, he makes you like, carry all like fucking rocks or whatever. And then you're like, oh, I need a break. And he's like, for break, you stack wood. And then he's like whipping you. So like the joke is even your break is like oh, bloody hell. Like that's what it's like in fucking LCS. It's like back to the best of 1 mines. No, please. Like, double round robin. Like, mate, people aren't going to be able to tolerate it. It's going to be so whack. Like, because the other format, like I keep saying, LEC is perfect. You just feel like you get this little taste of like, okay, and now to the next phase. Now it's best of 3s, little taste of that. Now it's into the playoffs. LCK, if people haven't noticed, Double elim has revolutionized LCK playoffs. No longer do we have that shit where it's like, well, Gen.G would have been great against T1 Monty, but in the gauntlet they had to play KT, who beat them. Therefore, we never get to see the Gen.G team. No, now you get all the matchups. Look, the LPL, which you won't go into, has been fucked. But that's just because teams actually lost. That's like what should happen. An underdog team actually beat them. Like LCS is going to look so bad in summer. It was a struggle in spring. Because the problem here is, where's the juice? You have to wait so long, basically, to get to these matches you want. Like, first of all, FlyQuest 100 Thieves. That should have been amazing. It was dog shit. Then you get the upper bracket final. Well, that's the real final money. It was garbage. Like, when do we get the good matches? I want real high quality games. Can I have some, please? Please.
LCS is basically just League of Legends played at 0.5 speed. From what I can tell, it is crazy to watch this region compared to watching, Korea or China, where it just feels so slow a lot of the times. By the way, the same motherfuckers who are criticizing Gen.G are just like jerking themselves off over 100 Thieves right now. I guarantee you. There's some guy out there who's like, Gen.G so boring. I love me some 100
Also,
Thieves.
you know what? As much as I criticize Riot, Monty, I've got to give him credit. Here's where the round robin system does work. Because remember what all those boneheads said, Monty, where they were like, 100 Thieves is on a winning streak. Yeah, against the fucking LCS. We just described half the teams as shit. But the winning streak makes it sound like, oh my God, they were the best teams. Like, you can just take off those wins and chuck them in a bin. They're irrelevant, aren't they? Like, unless you're beating Cloud9, who gives a shit, basically.
Yeah. I mean, these teams are just not going to perform well internationally. I think we can say that with pretty big confidence right now. And as your points about the format, here's a little spoiler for you guys. LCS is going to change to the LEC format next year. That's what my little sources say.
I mean, that would be awesome. I'll be looking forward to that.
Thorin, I thought they weren't going to do it because I thought that they wouldn't want to pay for an extra broadcast day because that's very expensive, especially in Los Angeles. With the professionals that they have operating the broadcast. I thought they weren't going to do it, but it seems like they are trending in that direction. Even though the viewership is down, Riot seems really committed to the LCS. So that's the whole thing, guys, is that's how we know the LCS can't possibly be that unprofitable for Riot, because they're continuing to put money into it. And they seem very eager. So the marketing exercise must be going very well, but they don't actually tell the teams how well the marketing exercise is going. Of course.
Monty, here's all you need to know, because I understand American fans. There are certain things you will never get into their brain. Like we said about macro concepts, doing cross-map plays, doing two things at once on the map. Even worse than that will always be the double elim, the understanding of the format. And here's the meme, guys. You know the meme where the guy's at that party and he's on his own in the corner and he's like, they don't even know. And then all the people are dancing with girls, but he's like some edgelord incel guy. He's like, they don't even know that. You're that guy. What's happening is, here's who's dancing. Someone make this graphic for me. There's three sets of couples dancing, isn't it? So the one of them's like TI champion. One of them's like winner of LCK. One's like LPL champion. And you're the guy in the corner. Like, they don't even know none of these championships are legitimate because there should be a bracket reset. Like, guys, no one, there's only you care about that. Literally, we've all made our peace with the bracket reset so long ago. The amount of shit compromises we've had to make in esports, that's not even one of the worst ones, guys. Like we've explained a million times, it's worth it for the upside, isn't it? I'll take all the mega low bracket games. Like, for example, when Gen.G and KT have this banger now, I'll take that for being going. But if T1 lost in the final, technically they never lost twice. Who gives a shit? Who actually gives? Even though normally I'm a stickler for that one, who gives a shit? I understood that was the price when I accepted it. It's not a big deal. It isn't. Guys, please. That conflict of interest, there are certain things they'll never understand, Monty. Unless we speak another language.
You know that is the thing that tilts me the most in esports. That is, if you want to tell Monty, the number one thing you can say is, as you stare blankly into space and drool escapes your lips, but there is no bracket reset. It's like, motherfucker, you don't understand anything about this at all. Like, so you just want a shit format because of no bracket reset. So you think that we can play 2 best of 5s of League of Legends in the same day. So you want us to rent a stadium. Remember, everyone's losing money in esports. Remember ESPORTS Winter? You want us to rent a stadium for an entire additional day that we may not even need. Fuck you. Like, this is so stupid. We have to make a compromise right now. Would I here guys, would I rather just have a best of 3 and best of 5s across across multiple days? Of course I would. That would be rad. We did that with Overwatch League. It was cool. But we can't have that right now, guys. We cannot have it right now. We have to be real about what we can accept. And this is way better than a single elimination bracket. You are dumb. Fucking hate
I just love the way things never get through. Like, if people don't know, probably one of my favorite periods in League was the literal like 2 weeks in which every person who was an NA of LCS fan told us that like there wasn't a conflict of interest between Doublelift Lena and like TSM, and that besides, it's not like they never do anything like leak info, and then like, and then they just woke up that day like, well, there you go then. I guess that's just happened. Because think how rarely you ever get that like moment actually pays off like that.
I remember waking up that day and looking at it, and then I immediately texted you, and I was like, "Is this real?"
I know
like,
exactly.
Am I dreaming?
Exactly. This must be a lucid dream or something. Exactly.
I can't. Like I was doubting myself that it was actually true, and like the words I was hearing from the clips on the stream were real, because I was like, "No, this is like my dreams are reality."
Well, the joke is that
real?
like you could easily believe, Monty, that happened this year, but it was like us using those like AI programs that can like mimic the voices. You know, those like fake clips they put out like Biden or whatever. You could believe that. Like the joke is this is what our skit would have been for Lena, like, but not for real. Like even we wouldn't have thought they'd do it for real. Like, and then I'll never forget. Here's the one thing I do love about Lena. She's committed to her approach. I think it's an idiotic approach, but the idea that she was already in so much trouble, then she just went to Reddit and blamed the sponsor. I was like, I can't handle this bit. Like, we don't have to do anything. They just destroy themselves. Like,
by the way, you know, if TSM actually sells out of League and they sell their LCS spot, we are going to have a victory parade for the Holy War.
For sure.
1,000%, guys, because we will have won. We will have won.
Exactly.
We already did win. We did.
Spiritually, we already won. But that'll just be like the final victory, won't it? Like that'll be like the end. Essentially, the point is at that point, they are our Carthage, and we did completely destroy them.
Yeah, I'll just
burn to ashes.
I'll be Achilles dragging the corpse of Hector/TSM around the back of my chariot, circling the city of esports. That's what it's going to be.
Well, here's the thing, Monty. The one area that wouldn't be applicable is obviously the characters of Reginald and Hector could almost not be further apart. But at the same time, they would also do anything for the right woman. Actually, I'm thinking more of Paris there, but fair enough. I guess technically Hector also did it for his family and duty and all that jazz too. So whatever.
I mean, Hector unfortunately got roped into it. He was pretty cool. He was pretty cool. He got roped into Paris's fuck-uppery. Okay. Well, I know you guys want us to probably talk about LPL a little bit as well, but unfortunately, I have not seen the LNG OMG games yet because they happened. We are recording this at 8 a.m. and they happened like 4 hours before that happened, and I was sleeping. So I think we're gonna have to save a lot of the LPL conversations till next week.
Yeah, we'll just do a special one next week. We'll figure something out.
Well, we've got LCK Finals, LPL playoffs. We have LCS Finals.
We'll put emphasis on it. We'll obviously talk about all the regions.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about, and we wanted to dedicate more time on this show to the TSM CLG news because obviously that is breaking, and there may be a 4 horsemen coming about that as well. We were discussing that, seeing if we can get something together there, because I think there's a lot deeper conversation about the state of business in esports at the moment that can be elucidated by a few people within the industry. But that'll probably happen next week, I would think. So
and as usual, I'll say the usual joke. If you want to know what we discuss on the 4 Horsemen, tune into Hotline League and all the really interesting topics they didn't talk about. That'll be on the 4 Horsemen. So that's actually how we structure the show. Exactly. Yeah, we wait for Travis to go first. We look at what he didn't talk about. Oh, everything great, right? Put that on the docket. There you go. It is in many ways the anti-Hotline League, isn't it?
Yeah. And obviously OMG is very exciting in LPL right now. We will get into that. Also, so we will get there. LEC also back this week. It's a crazy fucking week for League Esports. I probably won't have time to watch all of the games because it's my son's birthday, but hopefully we will get in most of them by the time this goes on Tuesday. We are going to do some viewer questions now, guys. Of course, that is.
Let's do a quick break.
Yeah, we'll do a quick break, and then we're going to go into viewer questions from the Insight, or Last Free Nation, rather. Almost fucked that up. Last Free Nation Discord. If you are a crew member, you know how to ask the questions. We'll do that after this quick break.
As I was rudely cut off there, I will complete the joke that I was going to say so people don't die of suspense. The joke is that even though we railed against people having companies called Team Solomid and then just making it like TSM Corporation, like the joke is that's how you'll know when we've actually sold out, guys. When we sell to the Saudis in like 5 years, obviously they can't call it Last Free Nation. Just wouldn't really work with their branding, would it? So what they'll do is they'll just rename it to like TSM, it'll be LFN LLC or something like, and then you'll know we've truly sold out. And we'll go, what do you mean, last? We'll also just gaslight the fuck out you like everyone else was like, Last Free Nation, it was always LFN. I think you'll find. Like, there you go. That's where you'll know when we've crossed to the dark side.
Okay, so if you guys are supporting us on our Discord, thank you very much. We're going to go into our reader questions right now. Name a fictional character for each of the following and explain why. One that made you cry. I don't know if a fictional character has made me.
There must be someone in the movies made you cry. Come on.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Like movies especially are very good at doing that emotion, right? In books, I agree, it's harder.
Yeah, books are a bit harder.
I feel like in a book, by the way, I don't really engage in that same way. Like I'm sort of thinking in my mind a bit. In a movie, I do take it on a bit more full on. I could definitely get emotional for a movie.
Look, I think definitely what gets me is like actually kids movies, like the Pixar or the Disney movies. Okay. Those can be
what,
very
like Up or something. You cry your eyes out when you watch that.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever. You're just like, right. He was an old man and he loved her. Oh, bloody hell. I can't. Is that you're just fucking wailing at you? Keep me whatever. It's whatever. Here's the thing. I get emotional at movies that I'm in this aspect, Monty. I am very much a caricature. I get emotional at exactly the sort of things in those memes where, you know, it's like men have no emotions. It's like, you know, when do they ever cry? You know, the one where it's like the fucking stoic guy, like, but it's like I get emotional at like Gladiator or something, you know, where it's like he's so heroic and like he's so right on and he's willing to sacrifice.
Like, when he's like dying and his like wife is there and
I love that shit. Yeah, exactly.
The wheat. Oh yeah. That's
that
a great,
shit gets
that's
to
a great
me.
sequence.
That gets to me,
too, man. Me too. That's good.
Or even moments that are cheesy, like, you know, in Spider-Man 2, where like fucking they lift him up on that bus, like, hey, he's a hero, watch out, careful. Like that shit gets to me a bit as well. You know, that can get that, like that. That's sentimental in a way that I vibe with, you know.
A fictional character that others love but you hate.
I think I've already said this before. It ties into one of my bigger takes that triggers people. One of the reasons I don't give a fuck about Breaking Bad is I never particularly thought the Walter White guy was that awesome. It was just whatever. Like, I don't know why people like that character so much. Like, to me, I even think, spoiler if you never watched the show, I even think his actual journey wasn't as interesting as it was made out, Monty. Because here's the weird thing about the end of that show. At the end, he sort of withdraw from that world and try and like end on like a semi-positive note. To me, the whole way the show should have ended is at the end, he is just some Pablo Escobar, full-on motherfucker who's realized something like all of my life was an illusion. My family was nonsense because my wife never really respected me. My kid just, you know, at the end, I thought the conclusion was going to be he just goes full on like dark side shit. Whereas like, I thought it was actually kind of a bit of a whimper the way that show ended. So essentially everyone else seems to love the Walter White character. I just thought it was whatever, man. I don't give a fuck. Not bothered. There you go. Not bothered.
So I really hate, certain characters in movies. So here's two very like examples from two different eras. So I hate the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's because I think Audrey Hepburn's character is a complete fucking psychopath and she is so emotionally abusive to the men that she's in relationships with, and the men are just falling over themselves. Look, I think Audrey Hepburn does a crazy good job of acting that character. Like, I admire her acting, but the ending of that movie where the man just falls over in the relationship and just basically capitulates to the constant abuse is just so crazy to me. And then also, here's another one, 500 Days of Summer, when I hate...
Oh, the Joseph Gordon-Levitt guy, I'm guessing.
I hate Zooey Deschanel's like manic pixie dream girl characters,
which is the movie character she plays in every movie, you know, every movie in it. I don't know.
Everything where she's just like so zany and crazy and fun, but is just actually super emotionally abusive to everybody around her. I hate it. I have no idea why people simp over these characters when really being with them is just absolute torture.
Oh, I'm with you, mate. If people don't know, the character and archetype Zooey Deschanel is trying to channel there is like every fucking idiot that went to an art school, like the girl that you can't get, basically. Like that's the one you would want. Like, oh, so quirky and weird and you. But spoiler, when you're an adult, that's just really annoying. Actually,
just very
really
selfish,
annoying.
just like extremely selfish and abusive. So I mean, I think people like love these movies, and I have no idea why, because they. And it's not that the acting isn't good. Like I said, I think Audrey Hepburn's amazing in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but the actual content of the story is actually just deeply sad. It's not like at the end you're like, oh wow, this was a great relationship. It's like, oh man, this is a dark
Dude,
ending.
you know
where
what's crazy?
This dude's just in this relationship with this psycho.
You haven't put two and two together on this, but in some ways, Zoe Deschanel is like the modern day Audrey Hepburn. Just relative to their eras, what the type of role they're playing. Because she also was always the cutesy, like fucking feminine, sort of diminutive, sort of female lead in all those movies. That's probably what she's most famous for.
All right, next. You love but others hate. Which characters do you love but others hate?
Ooh,
I mean, I've said this before, but my favorite character in Game of Thrones is Tywin Lannister. I think he's actually the only sane person in that entire world. Everyone else is like actively sabotaging themselves. Here's another one. Others love but you hate. People love Robb Stark in Game of Thrones, and they were sad when he died. I thought Robb Stark was an idiot who didn't know how to do his duty and was like basically forsaking the political alliances that his family needed and not doing his role as a noble because he wanted to chase some like peasant girl ass. Like that is fucking shameful. Like he deserved to die. He was a shitty character and he was a shitty person. So there's one that I hate but others love. And I love but others hate. I thought Tywin was the only reasonable person within the entirety of like the first 3 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Let me think. What's the one I like that other people hate though? Because quite frankly, even though at the end, this could be what I could have done for someone that someone loved. Dude, I didn't get the people who it took until the very end of Game of Thrones to dislike the Daenerys Targaryen character. Like, what? Dude, I was out on her like 3 seasons in or something. Basically, after the Khal Drogo character died, I thought that character became really annoying and fucking like irrationally written and sort of like had mad plot armor as well. Like you could essentially, they become boring once you know they can't be killed off and they always succeed. You know, that does ruin shows like that. I'm trying to think of one that I actually liked that people didn't like though. Let me think. I mean, all right, if you want to do like a Game of Thrones one, for example, the obvious one's like Littlefinger.
Right,
dude, he actually was a very interesting character, and they actually wasted that one in the show as well. Like the point with that character, like all Machiavellian actors, is you don't have to agree with what they're doing, but you can marvel at their plans and the way they set people up and the way they feign one thing but then trick you with another, or use your own worst instincts against you. I always have admiration for characters that are well written like that, because I think it's tricky to write a villain character without just being like, haha, I am evil and I do it because I'm evil. Like that's the worst motivation ever for a villain, isn't it? Like you actually need it to be like essentially, the best villain is one where you can almost, in a fucked up way, imagine if I'd been through what they did. Maybe I would do an extreme choice or some crazy revenge plot. It's why I always say, even though the comic book characters, I find characters like Magneto super easy to relate to. Awesome. Yeah, because if you like think about like some of the movies, if your whole family was killed for some reason or the humanity was against it, you might have a totally radical expression of how you would do that. You might not always just be like, oh, cool, kumbaya and all that, like fucking Professor X. Like, there would be an angle of like, fuck these guys. And if I had powers like he did, mate, spoiler, I'd be bending that spore deck in a fucking, I went somewhere else, like a pretzel or whatever, you know.
There's like
it's the idea that's what I'd use Magneto powers for. I wouldn't like go and do some great shit money. I'd just go to the spore deck during IM Cavite and ruin the venue or something like the shittest use of the powers of all time.
Guys, there's like multiple other questions.
That'll do for that one. That'll do for that one.
I will do one more from this one. There were like 7 different of these examples. We've now done 3. We're gonna do 4. Was rewritten / character assassination. Obviously, for this one, it's all the film versions of the Count of Monte Cristo for me. We discussed this on a previous show in the questions about my name. Like, why the whole theme of the Count of Monte Cristo is that he loved this woman, and then he's put in jail because someone else wants to marry her, and there's a conspiracy against him. And he comes out, and she's married to his old rival, and he doesn't want her back. Like, the part of him that was capable of that love has actually died, and that's part of the tragedy. Yet all of the film versions are like, yeah, he should totally get back with her at the end and have a happy ending. Like, that's not even the point of anything. Like, did you read the fucking book? Like, it's constant character assassination against this guy. It's intended to be tragic, and there isn't a remedy. The end of the book is him being like, well, I guess I've wasted a bunch of time doing this entire decade long revenge plot. Maybe I'm going to go figure out how to live a normal human life and have, have some sort of internal growth at this point in time instead of just sulking around and trying to get revenge. So I think that's pretty bad character assassination.
Just because everyone knows Game of Thrones, I'll pick another Game of Thrones one. The obvious one, if you've read the books, is Stannis Baratheon in the books is a fucking banger character. Because essentially the books, they do make it like they're all more strictly defined and they all represent a different ideology in the world. It's why even one thing that's like a low-key angle people don't pay attention to when they watch the show is a lot of the flavor text in Game of Thrones gives you clues as to how the characters are going to behave. Like, when they all have those mottos to their houses, go and look how each of them acts when they face a crisis point. They tend to do what the motto of their house traditionally does because it's like the archetypal definition of who they are. So essentially, people don't know. In the book, Stannis Baratheon he's exactly what you'd imagine like a great military commander is, Monty. Like he knows he knows on one hand the value of soldiers and men, but you don't throw them away for nothing. But when you have to make the hard decision, you make the hard decision. That might mean some people die in order to take like a position. And essentially, he's like essentially like the super hyper rational male, basically, which is why in the book they make it very interesting that he's playing with these elements, but then he's superstitious with that red witch. Like, there's a different side to him. In the show, they absolutely ran that character into the ground, and for real, just did shit that didn't make any sense just to sort of like move the show on. And so some of the stuff they did, if you haven't read the book, it's outrageous what they do to that character. They absolutely ruined it for our money. It was a really good character in the book. Had way more sort of depth to it.
Who is the bigger spineless weasel, Travis Gafford or the guy that gets cucked in the pornos? Damn. I'm not sure those are comparable. I don't see Travis as a cuck in
Travis isn't even that bad. Like, guys, this is where we are over dramatized. Travis isn't like any evil character in a fucking book or some shit. It's just a guy who's mildly wimpy about some things he should have more balls about,
Yeah. And the thing about it is that Travis does do good things. Like, I appreciate him breaking the CSM news and the CLG news. I just wish he would do things sometimes when he doesn't stand to benefit from it. Like, sometimes could he do something selfless for the good of the industry? Just
like, you all are like, right, pick from this list who was the most evil: Genghis Khan, Hitler, fucking Mussolini, and then Travis Gafford. Like, why are you putting Travis in there? Like, you know what I mean? Like, he shouldn't even be on these lists. Outrageous.
If LFN was to field a LoL roster with no restraint or budget, what region would you pick? Korea, spoiler. And which players would you field, and would Thorin be the coach? I think Thorin can be the emotional leader.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just do the speech. That's all.
I think right now, you could field T1's roster with like Viper, and you'd feel pretty good about that.
Or Ruler or something, if you want to.
Yeah,
put
Ruler,
that. Yeah. Because there's the obvious thing me and Monty would do. Spoiler, if we have unlimited budget, I'll tell you what we're doing right now. We're reversing the Korean exodus. We're taking scouts coming back. We're bringing like fucking Ruler back. We'll just make a fucking super team. Why not?
Tarzan.
Yeah, exactly. Just make a cracked out team of the 5 best players in Korea. That'd be sick.
Yep. Have either of you played instruments as a hobby? After realizing how much time I've wasted on League this year, I've decided to learn violin. It's been very rewarding. Yeah, that probably is a better use of your time than playing League of Legends. I played saxophone for a couple years when I was in school. I picked up banjo a couple years ago, but I have been very inconsistent in practicing it recently. I would love to get back to that, and I am hoping to do so eventually.
I have almost no musical skills. I did about 15, 18, 20 years ago, some time period. I'm not even sure what year. I did at one point buy a bass, electric bass, and I had an amp, and for like a year I played it. But I only learned, like, cause it's the good thing about the bass, I only learned like very simple, like Ramon songs that are just like the same shit on the same, you can even do them all on the same string if you don't know. They're not super complex. Like, I never got good at the bass. Like, I did buy it because I was influenced by like fucking Tim Comerford from Rage Against the Machine and Geddy Lee from Rush and fucking Colin Greenwood from Radiohead, but I could never play any of their songs. I wasn't good enough, so unfortunately, just something I never put any time into.
Yeah, I will say, like, I do regret not being able to play an instrument. That's something I would like to fix in the coming years. Hopefully, I will have more time. What are the funniest name tags players ever got? Do you have any specifically hilarious, funny gamer?
I mean, an obvious one like Nuclear Int, and then be one of the worst mid laners. You did yourself there, mate. You know what I mean? Even though you end up being good, irrelevant, it's a pretty shit one too. Like essentially any name which just sounds like you're garbage. Like you're not really setting yourself up for success, are you? You know what I mean?
I mean, usually the companies will get rid of the really egregious names before they ever hit the pro scene. So,
I mean, obviously, Big Fat LP / Big Fat
oh,
GG is pretty
right.
outrageous. Although I always thought the genius of that was that because they didn't know what, like, because they didn't know one of them, he just put the other one in, but it meant the same thing, and they both just meant big dick. But they were like, yeah, that's fine. The change. So he just did it. He tricked you again, you fools. Yeah, that was funny at least. That angle was hilarious. I've got to give him that.
Do you guys think Faker's GOAT status is somewhat weak due to the circumstances of all those championships won, considering how his season 4 season went? Okay, season 4, he was being griefed by Piglet, and yeah, and his bot lane was really bad.
The team just fell apart completely. Yeah.
And all of Samsung KT players leaving for a weaker region. Yeah, but it got better. I mean, 2015, he still won worlds over all those players that left, right? If you had slotted Rookie in his position, could he have not been the GOAT? That's a big argument. I mean, I think that is a
problem with
very
that
fair
discussion,
argument.
this is where I actually am in general not a fan of that approach, Monty. What I prefer to do to judge if you're the GOAT is I look at your circumstances. I do judge like how hard was yours compared to the other person. But one thing I don't think is a very good approach, because it has a fundamental flaw that I'm going to get into now, is that of like, yeah, but what if I had your exact team? Because I'll give you an obvious example. Here's why Rookie probably would actually win less championships if he was in Faker's spot. Because Faker's entire style became like, I also sort of shot call and jungle for the jungler, and then I do like out. Rookie's style was I'm just the absolute best mid laner you can be. So like, it's the same reason why when we do the Chovy example, people lose their mind. Like, but if Chovy was there, Monty, he wouldn't do all the moves. Yeah, we're just talking about purely if you had to replace a mid laner. We know you'd have to reformulate T1. Obviously, they wouldn't play the way T1 does. They wouldn't even have the picks to play that way. So I just think it's not a terrible comparison, but like to me, it's more like essentially if Rookie had an equally good team, but that fit him, just like Faker had one that fit him, then who wins the most? That's the interesting convo. Because the reason I think the Rookie angle is an interesting one is I actually even think the IG that won Worlds was a bit shaky. Like, I don't think Rookie's ever had a team that was as good as the best Faker teams. Remember, if we're talking about the best teams of all time, we already did this with Dom when we did that. Like, guys, there's a reason why when we ranked all the best Worlds teams ever, like Rookie's one team on there was IG, and it was quite near the bottom. Like Fakers were like, what, 3 of the top 6 or 7 or something? Like he had some pretty cracked out rosters. He had some very good, but they also fit his style. That's actually why, in some ways, look, when I say I think Rookie's the GOAT, I just mean in terms of if I myself could pick a player that I'm going to play as in League with his skill set, his longevity, maybe I would pick Rookie, but that's a very individual perspective. The thing with Faker is he has had just an amazing career, how he's fit himself to lineups, how he's been carried, how he's carried, how he can play the utility meta, and how he could do the carry champions, how he overcame challenges to become good on like Azir and mages that you wouldn't think he was good on, but he still remained excellent on the R's. That's the thing about Faker, is like he's got a very good case to be the GOAT. Obviously, because he's got the complete package, hasn't he?
Yeah, but there is also always an argument about like, you know, if a player wasn't on the right roster that had the prestige and was capable of building around him. I mean, a lot of the argument for Tom Brady, you know, would Tom Brady have been as good if he didn't have Bill Belichick for 20 years of his career? You know what I mean? Like that's very hard. And Bill Belichick probably is the greatest coach in the NFL during that time period. And they also had, you know, once they started winning, they became a destination where good players would take worse contracts in order to be on the Patriots. And there was an expectation of winning and a total mindset around that. And the same thing is true of T1. Like T1 is the most prestigious organization in the entire history of esports. And there's a cachet that comes along with that. And they've always had their pick of amateur players who want to play for their amateur team and players that want to sign long-term contracts with them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there has been a lot of advantage, but Faker is still extremely good. Right. I mean, the counterpoint to that is obviously if Faker wasn't so good, T1 would have replaced him. Period. They would have had their pick, and they picked Faker.
And remember, it's not like there weren't players. Like there were times when BDD was considered better, and then Chovy and Rookie. Like there's times, yeah, you're right, Monty. They obviously could have done it. They could have been ruthless. Yeah.
Which 2 players in LoL history would you have liked to see team up but never did?
I mean, I've said this in the past because here's the thing. It technically happened for one tournament, but not for real. I always wanted Forgiven and Froggen to play together because I always thought their playing styles would merge so well together. You have the fucking mid lane who has the super high floor and mega in team fighting is just going to late. And then you have the super aggressive ADC who's going to control I thought that would have been, I know they only played that one like bullshit EU Masters, but that would be a banger lineup. I think those players would fucking pop off.
Yeah, I think
Who's yours?
Smeb and Faker or Score and Faker. Like Score and Faker would have been particularly good because I think both of them are rather selfless and would have really enabled other parts of the map. I think that would have been really fun to have seen. What would you consider the different eras of League of Legends? Considering that, I think this is in reference to the fact that we talk about eras of Counter-Strike. I think for me, the first era would have been like the pre-league times when there was a lot more international competition. It was a tournament circuit, kind of the development days from like 2010 to 2013. Where we saw a lot of movement on teams between regions. And then I think in 2013, we saw like the rise of Faker and the first Faker era that kind of went through 2016, 2017. And then there was the time, like if you talk about that, like the all Korean era. And then there was the start of the competitiveness of the LPL. And that goes from probably like 2018 to 2020, maybe. I don't know. What do you think? And then we're kind of in the next era right now.
That was like the neo
Korea.
Korean Renaissance or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ever since Dan won, it's sort of like Korea shifted back to them somewhat.
Yeah. So I guess I would consider those like the primary eras. What do you think as the historian?
I don't think that's a bad grouping. The other way you can obviously do it is you go by dominant teams. So you had like the T1 period, then you had a second T1 period with a different one. Then you had like essentially like the LPL teams just take turns depending on who has the best style to win. And then now I would say here's the saddest thing. I would say the last few years, look on paper, it should have been the damn one era. They should have got more 1-1 worlds. They could have had 3. That's what's so ridiculous. They probably should have even had more LCKs. So I actually think they somewhat didn't win with as much as they could in that window. And then now, I mean, the interesting thing now is who the hell could have expected after summer split last year that like T1 would be the best again? And in fact, they look like they could with this lineup. They could do this for years, guys. Like, and even if you change, you only talk about change one player at a time. You don't have to ever overhaul. So I'm actually interested because I do get the sense, quite frankly, that this should be a continuation of Korea winning for the next few years. Whoever the best Korean is should probably be number 1 in the world. Just seems like the way the game's gone the last few years.
Do you think having so many teams hurts or helps the LPL as a league? I mean, the Chinese viewers seem to like it. I think it's very good for the Chinese market because they have so many different fans and they're able to play regionally. I think for international viewers, it is very difficult to keep up with it.
Yeah, the problem is, I just think if you want to be the guy, no one can do this, but who watches all the matches, it just makes it too much of a strain, and a lot of the games are going to be bad. That's why, for me, it's never been a problem, because what I've always liked about the LPL is, since I only watch the really good matches, I can just tune in for loads of really good matches, and I don't have to watch, no one's making me, like Malcolm from Clockwork Orange, watch like fucking Thunder Talk versus UP. I don't have to. I can just I'll wait till JDG plays EDG, don't I?
If you could add one rarely played champ to the pro meta forever and remove one forever, what champs would you pick? But you can't pick Yuumi.
Obviously, yeah, the Yuumi one would ruin it, right? So let's do remove first. I feel like remove's the easier one, right? What champion do you despise, Monty? What just ruins, generally always just ruins pro play if it's in?
What is super boring?
I mean, I feel like in your vein, wouldn't like Aphelios be on the table at least?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Aphelios at all. I think he's really stupid. So I'd probably take out Aphelios. I would say the one I would add is probably, this is a very Monty answer, probably Ivern.
Or LS. Okay, whatever.
No, because I think it changes the way the game is played a lot.
It's your idea of a jungler for sure.
Pathing.
Yes.
I would also maybe add Blitzcrank, because I think Blitzcrank is hilarious.
Oh, it's mega, yeah.
Like when Blitzcrank is played professionally, it's basically always exciting. Like going back to Mad Life, now we see Lehens using it in LCK. Blitz is like fucking sick.
Oh, I can't lie. Part of it is insanely biased to Mad Life, but dude, you just get like it's almost like you get the goosebumps even when they lock Blitzcrank in. Even when you know it's probably not the right one for this call.
You know it could be huge. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just that feeling of like, but what if he lands the grab? What if he lands it? Because that was so exciting back in the day, wasn't it?
I mean, Blitz is meta right now too, so it's fun. It is fun.
Let me think. Who do I want to remove? You know what's funny? Because it obviously ties into the theme, but by pure coincidence, even though it came in at the same time as the Finals, I also despise Senna. I just hate that. I hate to play against that champion. I hate it in pro play. I hate the way it like you go across the whole map when it's all. But I hate everything about that. I actually think that's one of the ones where it's only because of Philios, Yumi, and all the rest of that shit exists in Botlin and Zeri that people forgot like what absolute trash the Senna design was. Like, the only time it was ever acceptable was those like weird fasting Senna. That was a cool angle. That was a way to make it viable. I thought when it was like the main ADC champion was that was a shit era of League of Legends. That was terrible. That period.
I would also take out Corki because I think Corki's extremely boring.
It's very boring, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like the most boring. I like poke champs generally, but it's the most boring poke champ for sure. And another one I would add is actually Rengar. I think jungle Rengar was really fun when it was meta. Like jungle assassins are great. I love the ult and like being invisible and able to hunt people down on the map. I have very fond memories of Dandy's Rengar. That is cool.
What would I want to be played more, though? That's the problem. All right, you know what? Even though it's not really my style of champion, I'm not a huge fan of the players that play it. I do think that whenever it's in the meta, it really does make for some really exciting games.
It really is
like, that's going to be the ultimate outplay champion, hasn't it? Like, if you have the mechanics on that, like people, you can see it from leader clips if you ever done so. It is amazing the shit you can pull off with that champion for sure. Like, the skill ceiling is really high. I'm always a fan of that in top lane.
Next, the classic Thorin questions of aliens attack Earth and we can only defend ourselves through League of Legends returns. This time, you are tasked with putting together the ultimate team using a one player per region rule. In other words, LEC, LCK, LCS, LPL, and one player from any other region.
Probably PCS or something, I'm guessing, for that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, you could make an argument for, like, peak Maple or peak Sword Art. I mean, Sword Art used to be really good.
or something. They're all bangers, Because that's what I feel like we have to do. Since we're doing all five, we should probably do something like take Carcer or fucking Sword Art or something, right? Because let's be real, Carcer even was on amazing LPL teams. Like we could actually just make a banger lineup. Should we do Carcer as a jungler?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think at this point in time, just based on support pool, you probably have to take. Are we taking peak players? I guess we'll take players at their peak, regardless of era. Let's make that rule.
Let's be real. The support has to be a Korean. That goes without saying, surely.
Yeah, it's probably Mata or I would say Keria.
Keria now is pretty cracked too.
Keria now is pretty.
You can't go wrong with those two choices, basically.
I would take Keria now. I would probably take LEC. I guess you have to take Caps.
As the mid laner, yeah, that one makes sense. Because here's the thing, we still get an amazing mid laner, even though we're using an LEC player. That's a pretty good one, I think.
I have to take peak Caps. So LCK Keria, peak Caps, Karsa. So we have 80 carry. Well, that's easy for LPL. And where's our top laner though? We have to take an 80 carry from LCS or a top laner from LCS.
Shit, wait, we'll probably have to just take doublelift then, don't we? And then pick a top laner from China, I guess, instead, right?
And then we have to take, I don't know, like 369 top or something like that.
Something like that. Or like peak Zoom or something. Yeah. One of those players, right? It's the fact that at the end, because of our whack LCSs, we had to take double lift. Like. Then again, though, I'll tell you what. With this lineup double lift, you might get out of groups, mate. I feel like with this many goats, you might actually get out of groups.
The thing is that he's objectively the best choice because he's the best. He's the best North American player of all time. So you kind of just have to take him. Any other player, like who the fuck else are we going to take? Like Xmithy, like Pole Belter? Like it's bad, guys. It's bad out there. Thoughts on Ricky winning a total of 2 best of 5 since 2019 MSI and LPL, 5 if we count regional playoffs.
Thoughts on Ricky?
Rookie, sorry.
Rookie, right? Okay.
Rookie winning a total of 2 best of 5 since 2019 MSI and LPL.
Right. What he's doing there, by the way, is what shitheads do. He's doing the Aaron Rodgers thing there. Like, he's only 8 and 9 in the play. No, he isn't. His team is, you fucking moron. So, spoiler, if you actually think Rookie sucks, just tell me which of those splits he sucked in. Rookie might be the most elo-held great player I've ever seen. He even has teams. Top did it this year, where, look, he actually wasn't as sick on top this year as on past teams, but they always look good in the regular season and then just inexplicably into the playoffs. So, I think that's. I don't even get what the question is. Put in the conclusion you can't. You obviously think he's overrated, don't you? All I'll say is you don't know League of Legends. Use your eyes and your brain, not the fucking standings. You know, I can do the same thing. By that logic, by the way, Bjergsen's one of the worst LCS players of the last 5 or 6 years. Where's all the titles? Where's all the finals? Where's all the semis? It's nonsense, isn't it? All right, Monty, what is your thoughts on Rookie winning 2 best of 5s in how many years?
He's still really good. I mean, this is architect of Korean esports based Joe and asking the question. So he's just doing this to get a rise. He's a known troll. He's a known troll.
Sadly, that is the one area that it does annoy me about a lot of the questions. People have sort of figured out how to make my rants begin, and they incept the idea of the rant into my brain, but they do it like they're, they always ask it naively. It's like them asking you, like, but what about a reset? But they just know they're doing it to set you up. Like, yeah, you got me on that one. Fair enough. Whatever. You got me on that one. You can have that one.
Lately in LoL and CSGO, there have been a lot of Tricasts with pro players. Do I enjoy this? I mean, it depends on the pro player. I frequently enjoy it. Sometimes I don't enjoy it. Sometimes like I've enjoyed it with like Yankos and Perks. I think those have been really interesting in terms of their insights, especially into the early game. Some other pro players, maybe not.
My problem with that whole topic, because I've seen it for too many years now, mate. This used to do this back in StarCraft 2 when they would like a crowcast. I'd basically care about the topic if you guys didn't say every single pro ever was amazing on the cast the first time they go on the cast. You're so feckless. Because what it shows me is I just like this player or novelty. Like even Perks isn't a good caster. He's barely done any casting. Like, yeah, he's got some nice insights. He's going to be a bit cheeky. You wouldn't want to listen to 50 games of it. You want to listen to 2 or 3 every now and then. That's when it's cool. I did think actually Yankos was uniquely good. He seemed like Yankos he was mega, but I will just add in, it's the reason why I knew someone like Kedra would be a good caster. If you're someone like a jungle or a support who actually was an intelligent player, you're probably the one with the natural skill set best suited to become a color caster. You know, you already think about the game that way.
Were season 6 TSM legit good? Were they a top 4 contender at Worlds?
I don't think anyone actually said they were. I think most people were like, if they do well, they could make semis. It was like that. That was like the form guide. But here's the thing: they were like, spoiler, you don't win like 17 out of 18 best of 3s if you shit, Monty. You got to be pretty fucking good. Like, and you look at the lineup, like that was one of the better rosters constructed. Like they could win the lanes. Double-lifting Bjergsen could carry the game. They essentially had MVPs competing against each other in the same team, but for real, Cloud9. So like, yeah, I thought that was a pretty good team. That's why actually the season 6 one is the biggest tragedy. Mate. And I will also add in, just because people forget this, when you're the number 1 seed, that is a brutal group draw. You got Samsung, who ended up in the final, and RNG, who was one of the best teams in the world. Like, that's my group, and I'm the number 1 seed. Like, how's this seeding working if I get a worse fucking group? Because and that was the one where the 4th team, remember, the wild card was Splice from Europe, who weren't even a bad team. That's like one of the craziest things. That's a number 1 seed just getting fucked into a group of death. I did. That was the one year. If people don't know, you can go look this up. I actually wrote a column after that defending TSM and just saying, like, to me, that was almost like if you played that Worlds out 10 times, that's the worst outcome. You know what I mean? Like, there's other ones where they get out of groups. Man, they were almost one game. They beat fucking Samsung in a game. They were playing well against RNG. Like, I do. That is the one year I do feel sorry. Season 7, fuck them. That group was a joke. They should have easily got out that one. Season 6, I do feel bad for TSM. I think in a normal group, they'd have been in the playoffs at least. I thought it was a good team.
Would LFN acquiring TSM's LCS slot be the Holy War's ultimate victory? We don't want the LCS slot. I mean, I would just rather...
Unless someone wants to fund it through our company with us paying nothing and we just run the slot. We do that, of course, yeah.
Of course, yeah. But, yeah.
Obviously, we would rebrand to Lenovo Free Nation. And and we would conduct all business over an open, like, stream, basically.
I mean, I would just let our Discord subscribers run the team for the lulz. That's what I would do. It'll be like Twitch plays LCS. We'd do that for you guys. That would be fun. Bengi is the T1 coach and truly only has to be the personal shield for T1 drafts. Wolf is a wildly popular streamer in Korea, and Bang married the GOAT G-Sun. While we will always clown on them and thank them for being Faker's wards, did they get the last laugh in their retired
did Bang
career?
Actually marry G-Sun? I knew they were dating. They did actually marry. Fair play.
I don't know. Maybe they are. I don't know. But they've been dating for a long time.
All right. What was the end question, though?
Did they get the last laugh in their retired careers? Bengi, Wolf, and Bang. I mean, they had successful careers. It's not like we wish them unhappiness. I'm glad they're doing well afterwards. I think Wolf found his true calling as a streamer and not as a support player.
Also, the problem with that question is this, right? You did ask the question as though what actually happened was they were all just amazing, and then Faker just one day was like, "Get the fuck out! You're all fired, and you know what? I hope you have bad lives." And then they were like, Faker, I succeeded and got an awesome wife though. Didn't I get the last laugh? What last laugh? Surely Faker's like, great job, Bang. Yeah, I really appreciated playing with you, and I'm happy you found, marital success. Like, what last laugh? Like, guys, believe it or not, every story isn't some like thing where you're like the edgelord. They're like, I get the last laugh. Like, that's just a character we play on this show. Where you can have just a satisfied life too. Not only as what he said, they had brilliant careers, they won worlds and everything, and then they just had a good life too. Everything sounds in order to me. Fair play.
How does Keria compare to peak Mata? I mean, he's getting close, man. He looks fucking amazing. I think he's a well-deserved MVP of this split. He's revolutionized the position. I mean, Mata revolutionized the macro game. I think Keria has revolutionized the champion pool. He's just an insane mechanical player, has insane game sense and vision. He's crazy good. He is definitely in consideration for one of the best supports, if not the best support of all time. He's an international title, though.
The key thing to me that makes these players not just like great, but like uniquely great is notice both of those players, you cannot actually perfectly mimic the style of the team because you don't have that player. You could do everything else right. You could split them up the same way as Samsung did. You could try and play the draft that fucking T1 does. You'll never be able to pull it off like T1 or Samsung did because you don't have Mata or Keria. That's the game changer. Like, there's very good players. There's great players. These are like, there's a reason why these players get called the best in the world from support position. Yeah. If you think it through, guys, that shouldn't even be possible. It should be impossible to be that. That's why, to me, Mad Life, Mata, and Keria are the cracked out ones in history. They're just too good. They're too good, guys.
Is it a certain set of metrics or more of a gut check / eye test that tells you if a player is washed?
I mean, I would say the eye test makes it very apparent if someone is washed. Like, it's probably the easiest aspect to look at. I actually think stats can hide it, team setup can hide it, draft can hide. The eye test will tell. Like, to me, washed is things like you can't pull off basic combos on your old signature champions. You play your champion that you always used to be really good on, but now it's like you play, it's a losing matchup in lane and you don't get any of the advantages, or you're forced in the meta. You can't play a bunch of the meta champions. So you're like picking something that's like mad sus, but it's your go-to. Like, to me, there's so many things you can just see with your eyes when someone's washed.
Yeah, I think also, we get information behind the scenes too about players and what they're doing on their teams, et cetera, et cetera. So there's often more that informs our opinions that you guys don't necessarily see. What are your takes on Faker receiving offers up to 20 million per year during his free agency? Even if we disregard the esports winter and budget cuts around the world, such a contract would be absolutely insane for a single pro player. Well, I think it depends on how much Faker values his long-term relationship with T1. He certainly has equity within the company, right? And if he thinks that there's going to be more long-term value to T1, it's also like he has enough money for the rest of his life. Does Faker seem like a particular opulent person to you? He probably already has $20 million in the bank account, guys, at least. Like, he is not motivated by money. He also
doesn't appear to have any hobbies that require money. Like, remember, he actually said, unironically, as a hobby, stuff like learning English. That reminds me, if people know, I've told this story before, about Fantasy, the Brood War player. And then when they said, what hobbies do you have? And he said, I don't really have hobbies. I just play Brood War. Like, some people are just like that. So what you're not thinking is this. You, as a Westerner who probably watches bloody Aiden Ross streams or something, you're thinking success would be having the Lambo and the super hot girlfriend. Faker doesn't want a Lambo. It would just be in a garage. He's not right. He's not driving it around, he's not fast and furious. He doesn't seem, quite frankly, as a player, to care about having a relationship while he plays. Like, he seems like one of those guys who's going to wait till he's retired and then meet someone, which, by the way, in Korea does work. That society's still set up that way. So to me, I don't know what he'd use the money on, mate. So in this scenario, even though to everyone else, like, put the 20 mil, it's like, guys, he already gets to be on a contender for best team in the world where everyone knows and loves him. He's a permanent fixture. He has no stress and drama. He gets to do anything. We joke that he coaches the team that he plays on 10 years later. there. Like, there's no upside to going anywhere else. I mean, as you've even seen, even if you made like a super team, like one of these JDG lineups, it might not even work. And then you're stuck in China with all that money, but you're on a team where it might be a bit scuffed and someone's in you. Like, I know why to a fan it sounds really cool, the idea he goes elsewhere, but it probably wouldn't play out like you hope. And also, by the way, 20 million, like, the problem with that deal is this. It's like those valuations of the LCS teams, Monty. Let me know when someone sells one and if it sells for that amount. Because otherwise the valuation means nothing. I can offer you whatever I want. Like, Monty, there's 500 million. If you don't ever say yes, you never have to test, was I ever going to give you the 500 million? Like, that's the thing. I heard these stories all the time of Steve Arnshire and LP. They're offering that. Let's see someone actually do the deal then. Go on then. Pull off the deal. Because why is it? Explain this to me, guys. It can't be Faker and then no one else. Why is it Faker 20 million, then the number two is like 6 million? Something's off about those numbers, isn't it? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it could just be a rich Chinese guy that wants the prestige, right? Or the hype. There's that possibility. But even so, like, Faker's still making like $5, $6, $7 million a year, guys. And like you say, he's not motivated by the things you think he trades 20 million, but then he has to go to China. He has to give up all of his equity in the team that he has helped build in T1 that could be going for years and years and years in the future. He could have a job for life with them, right? He can live comfortably in Korea without having to learn Chinese or live in a different environment or live in like the COVID lockdowns of Shanghai. Like, there were a lot of factors that went into this. And it's like, if he likes being in Korea, he likes being T1, they're bending over backwards for him. And he doesn't have life goals that require him to have more than the $20 million he already has in the bank. Like, at a certain point, money doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck?
I mean, here's the joke I would make, Monty. Every time in esports that a massive company like Billionaires or some huge, what's the first thing every league fan joked on Reddit? They should use that money to buy Faker. What would Faker do with the 20 million? He is Faker. He's already got Faker playing every game. There's nothing to spend the uplink money on, like you say.
And it's like, Faker himself probably cares more about his legacy, and he can build a better legacy off of T1. If I was Faker and I was set for life, I would care more about my reputation and being the greatest player of all time and making sure that that legacy is secure than 10 million more dollars. Like, that, to me, it would be much more. I would rather die being the GOAT of League of Legends than die having that somebody else take that away from me, but have 10 million more dollars than I would have anyway. That's me. And I think that's probably Faker too.
Yeah, we'll also throw in, if you ever follow sports, it's not that often actually that the superstar leaves for the giant money and has as much success as you think they're going to. A lot of times it scuffs the roster, they go to the wrong team. Like, to actually win, there's a reason why the eras in history in sports where people win loads of championships are the time periods where it's like Faker's career. You just stay on one team and they rebuild around you.
Yeah. Even people who play the money game, like, think about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is one of the richest people on earth, okay? And do you know what Warren Buffett does? He lives in the same house he's lived in for 50 years in Omaha, fucking Nebraska, because for him, it's just a game. It's about a high score. The money is the high score in a game. It's not that he actually cares about being rich or lives in a way that makes him more rich. Like, he doesn't live like a billionaire. So it's just about what people cares about. I personally think that Faker's priorities are in the right place. Do you think there should be more bans added to the draft phase in the future? No. We want to still see champions being played. Like, we want to see, I think the appropriate amount of bans are in the game currently. We have 160 champions. You have 5 bans. We don't need more bans. We've had this conversation. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
I will just say, I did absolutely tell all of you fucking marks that going from 3 bans to 5 wouldn't ruin the game. In fact, it's actually just made the game better, hasn't it? That's just obvious. Come on, guys.
I think there was a time because, 3 bans were there from the start of the game till 160, 150 champions. So there was time to add more, but realistically, we're not going to get another 100 champions added to the game at any point in time. It's just too many. So I think this is fine. What is a unique trait a player has that impressed you very much and you'd wish more players to have? That's an interesting question.
Well, I've got an obvious one that always springs to mind. I have never heard of a player where you ask other teammates and coaches and analysts who are like specialist analysts. People genuinely, no one I've ever heard of who played mid lane who seems to have the map understanding of Nuke Doc. I've just heard it from too many people, mate. Like every team he's in, like you can't get anyone. Here's the thing: fans will trash him. You'll never get teammates to do it. You'll never get analysts to do it. Like if that's one area, because the reason why coaches go on and on about that, if you're a casual fan, is because that's the nightmare when you join these teams and you become a coach. You get some player that you know is really skilled. You've been watching him for years, and then you're like, oh shit, he doesn't know how to play anything other than his role, and he sort of only knows the solo queue understanding of his role. When you try to like coach macro, I've heard it's like fucking Sisyphus's. The trial of Sisyphus, mate, is a nightmare. You're just pushing the same boulder up and then they're losing the game. Like start from square one. So if you get a mid laner that knows how to do that, it's the dream if you're a coach. It's the fucking dream, boys.
I will say that Score and Faker both have that macro sense and the capability of like shot calling the game around their teammates and their win conditions that is very unique as well. All right, last question. LCS is cracking and falling apart. Are there any NA teams you'd think do give good value to their sponsors in LCS? Probably Cloud9 and Team Liquid are number one in those categories, especially Team Liquid has managed to have a lot of long-term deals that they've seen a lot of success with. I think that Cloud9, a lot of the people aren't there anymore, but I think the content they put out around their Puma campaign, spoiler, I was a part of that, was really, really good. Like very well produced, really exciting. So I think those both Liquid and Cloud9 have done a very good job of trying to make value for sponsors.
I mean, the obvious one to me is G2.
Yeah, sure.
They basically invented modern branded around sponsors.
Yeah. So I think there are some teams that are good at it, but it's just getting harder and harder to do that effectively. Mostly because it's hard to get the pro players to participate.
By the way, even though I know people did make like the problem was there was a discussion on Twitter, if people don't know, in the industry recently about like, players don't brand themselves. The problem with that convo is the people having the convo are just fucking plebs. So who gives a shit what they think? Like, spoiler, just because you worked for an org and had access to their Twitter account doesn't mean you know everything about how pro players think and view the world. That's just the sort of nonsense everyone in the industry flexes. What I would say is this: the main problem, as Monty's saying, is the modern day pro player still doesn't understand his play doesn't make enough even to pay his salary. He still thinks, I'm like a sports star. I'm just here to ball, bro. I'm only here at the press conference because I won't get fined. Like, no, your whole business is sponsorship, you moron. The joke is, this might sound fucked up because competitively, I hate this idea. But if Bjergsen was killing it in the branding and the interview, it actually doesn't matter how he plays in the LCS. Like, you're actually doing your job at that point in time. The job of a pro player in esports is closer to WWE than it is to sports. You can't just be the guy like Aaron Rodgers. Like, I don't want to answer questions. I'm just balling out, bro. Like, then you're a shit player, even if you're Faker. Even Faker has to do the media. Everyone does that. Esports is media right now, guys. It just is.
I think Faker understands having to do the media better than probably most other pro players. And
it seems very professional, yeah.
The hilarious irony of it is that he's the player who probably has to do it the least, and he's actually one of the best at it.
Oh, he's a banger, yeah.
So lucky to have Faker. I think within our esport, because he understands his duty and he is quite selfless as a human being.
Put it this way, it's one of the reasons why I always thought Doublelift repeatedly saying spring split doesn't matter was one of the stupidest things a pro player could ever say. Because if you say that, you're not playing for my team ever. Motherfucker, if you don't try in one of the split, why have I even got you here? It's just a marketing exercise, esports. Like that stuff like that was so dumb. It's like that thing. You remember when we ragged on them during the online era when they wanted to just cancel spring split? Like, you guys are so dumb, you don't know your own industry. Like, if you gave the choice to LCS players, dude, the first thing they would do as the king is kill all the golden geese. They'd be like, those golden geese are making a lot of noise. Kill them all. Get rid of them. But where's all the eggs? Where's all the bloody eggs at? Like,
look at, I would say this, the closest traditional sport to esports is Formula One. Okay. And Formula, because it basically is just a video game, like the steering wheels are controllers at this point in time, and you're playing in a car, right? And the Formula One drivers are insanely good at PR. Like, look at Drive to Survive. Look at all the interviews they sit down for. Look at all the content that they're making for the actual racing circuit, like all the social media content they're making. Look at all the interviews they're doing. Here's something fun. Before I turned on SI today, this morning, I opened up Twitch, and recommended to me was Lando Norris, one of the F1 drivers. He was streaming to 20,000 people on Twitch, where he was sitting in a room.
E-racing, right?
No. Yeah, he does do that. But what he was doing this time was he was just talking about the last race, and he was doing basically a VOD review of his own fucking race.
Right.
And there were
Okay.
20,000 people watching him, and it was great. It was really interesting. But they understand the value of this, those F1 drivers, and these guys can do it on a circuit where they are constantly jet lagged, by the way, changing continents every fucking week. He's in the middle of the season right now and he's fucking streaming. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, if these fucking F1 drivers can do it, they're not being divas about it. Even the best drivers in the world are sitting down to interview for Drive to Survive. And by the way, think about how many hours of interviews all of those drivers are doing week after week after week to get the sound bites that they use on that TV show. It is crazy. And they're all bought into it, right? All of them are bought in. Why can't we have that in esports? The fucking pro players are the worst.
That was the last question, unfortunately, but it was a fitting end to the episode.
That's it. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Wow. Yeah, okay.